Chapter 5040. The mayor's wife hurriedly covered the children's mouths with her hand and shrank back in horror. "Please, Lord Mayor, now you can have everyone come out and go to the gathering." The old mayor stood up shakily, took out the sound-amplifying mystic weapon he usually used to summon people, and took a deep breath. There were about 400 to 500 people in Wangzhuang town. At this time, they were all summoned to the gathering. Everyone didn't know the reason and looked at each other. Upon seeing this, Qiaomu stealthily distributed transformation talismans to Mount Zuolan, Shenwu, and the others. The group simply showed themselves openly and stealthily mixed into the crowd of normal citizens, gathering at the venue with the crowd of Royal Manor Town residents. Around the gathering, there were thousands of soldiers from the state of Daluo, all wearing short armor and red feathered helmets. The townspeople of Wangzhuang town gathered together somewhat timidly. In the cold weather, even if there was a faint ray of sunlight on the horizon, everyone still felt cold in their hearts. Arbor stood in the crowd, looking left and right at the shriveled crowd. He suddenly felt as if he had returned to the Quoto village from several years ago. At that time, they were also this week. When faced with the bullying of the Heavenly Tao sect, none of the villagers dared to speak. They only dared to watch silently, hiding on the side like walking corpses. They dared to be angry, but didn't dare to speak. Today, it was still the same. In a different place, with a different group of people, nothing had changed. There was still a flock of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Weakness was indeed the original sin. Arbor frowned and looked forward. That Daluo General Hajuo stood on a stone pier half the height of a person, staring at the townspeople of Wangzhuang town below with bright eyes. He turned his head and gave his deputy General Gu Er a look. The young general immediately walked to the front of the crowd with half a whip and asked with a chuckle, "Lord Mayor, is everyone here?" The old mayor and his family stood at the front of the crowd. When he heard Gu Er's question, his body trembled and he nodded silently. Gu Er smiled. "Since everyone is here, let's bring them over." As soon as he finished speaking, there was the sound of iron chains swaying beside him. Everyone felt their hearts tighten as they subconsciously gathered closer to the center. Hua 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 hua. A chain as thick as an arm was dragged over from afar. Standing beside Arbor was a girl about her age, about 16 or 17 years old. Because of her nervousness, her round face was covered with fine beads of sweat. Arbor could clearly hear her rapid breathing, and it seemed that her heart was beating faster. "Ah!" the crowd suddenly exclaimed. Everyone looked along the long iron chain and saw 2 large iron cages, more than a meter high, being dragged over by 4 or 5 strong men. Clack, 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 clack. The friction between the cages and the ground produced a series of rough and ear-piercing sounds. In the cage, there were 2 monsters whose faces could not be seen clearly. Their hair was messy and drooped on their foreheads. A pair of small, blood-red eyes were staring at them through the cage. Arbor thoughtfully looked at the iron cage a few more times. Looking at the 2 zombies locked in the cage, one big and one small, he felt a sense of déjà vu looking at their figures. One of them seemed to be a boy. Wait, Arbor's eyes flashed, and his sharp gaze once again swept past the 2 monsters in the cage. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. They seemed to be the Fong siblings he met on Lotus Pond Island. "I worked overtime until 10 o'clock today, so I came back too late. I'll sleep first and make up for 2 more chapters tomorrow. Happy New Year! I still have to work overtime tomorrow, so I don't know when I'll be back. I'll probably make up for it later." Chapter 5041. The townspeople of Wangzhuang town all looked terrified as they took a few steps back in unison. Many townspeople huddled together. Other than the sound of each other's heavy breathing, there seemed to be no other sound between heaven and earth in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the scene of 400 to 500 people was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. The girl next to Arbor was nervously pinching the corner of her clothes when she suddenly turned her head to glance at Arbor. In other people's eyes, Arbor currently looked like a woman in her early 30s with a face full of freckles. Arbor also couldn't do anything about this transformation talisman when her image became so terrible. This transformation talisman was too random. Depending on its mood, it could transform however it wanted. In any case, it couldn't escape the word ugly ant, the girl called out to Arbor timidly. Arbor instantly felt like fucking a dog, and her gaze swept coolly over the girl. Ant? The exquisite and adorable Sir Jojo was actually called Ant? Who's your aunt? Your whole family is your aunt. The round-faced girl didn't understand why Arbor was looking at her with such a strange gaze, and she whispered timidly, Aunt, and we still escape? Arbor glanced at her. At a moment of life and death. Naturally, even if there's only a slim chance of survival, we still have to fight with our lives. The round-faced girl nodded and surreptitiously took out a wood-chopping knife from behind her waist. She muttered, Aunt, I think these people aren't decent people. Later, let's seize the moment and charge out. Arbor glanced at the kitchen knife in this fellow's hand, and the corner of her mouth secretly twitched. In the little stoic's opinion, it was enough to have a valiant heart that didn't fear death. At least among these people she was about to save, there were at least some who dared to come out and fight against fate. Zhuo glanced at the thing in the iron cage and lowered his voice to ask Arbor, Xiao, what's in this cage? Why did it feel like the whole world had changed after he woke up from his hibernation for over 100 years? In the past, he had never seen such an ugly creature. It was howling and panting in the cage. It looked like a human, but not like a beast. It gave people an indescribable feeling. Arbor glanced at him and silently took out a book from his inner world. He patted it lightly in Zhuo hand and said, Study it when you have time. The world today is very different from before you hibernated. Zhuo hand inexplicably trembled, and a thought flashed through his mind. Does this stoic face have a special hobby of handing out pamphlets to people? He flipped open the booklet titled Corpse Puppet Guide and saw a picture of a rotting corpse on the first page. There was a small line of words on it. Beginner-level corpse puppet. Likes to bite people. The speed at which its corpse poison spreads is low, and its walking speed is very slow. Zhuo hands trembled again. The zombie on the first page of the booklet was really lifelike, as if it was about to jump out of the paper. If he studied it in the middle of the night, his heart would probably be greatly affected. He hastily slapped the booklet shut and turned to give Jojo a kind smile. The little stoic glanced at him. These two in front of us have evolved to intermediate-level corpse puppets at most. However, 2 intermediate-level corpse puppets were enough to scare a group of mortals. When mortals saw such terrifying things, they would definitely be so scared that they wouldn't be able to walk. Chapter 5042. Just like now, when the townspeople saw them open the iron cages and drag out the 2 corpse puppets, they were so frightened that they couldn't stop screaming. The pale-faced women in the front row couldn't keep their legs steady and fell to the ground. The Fong siblings were sprawled on the ground, crawling on all fours, but their speed was very fast. Miss Fong passed through the crowd in an instant and roared at a fat woman who had fallen to the ground. The fat woman's eyes rolled back, and she actually fainted from fright. Ha ha! The mocking laughter of the Doruo soldiers came from all around, mixed with a few curses. So this is all there is to the people under the feet of the Emperor of the Divine Prefecture. 2 mid-level corpse puppets scared them to this extent. They really are a bunch of flowers in a greenhouse, so well protected. Could it be that they never even knew what corpse puppets looked like before? After the mockery, there was a wave of unbridled laughter, one after another. Arbor glanced at these Doruo soldiers from the corner of her eyes and sneered. The small hand by her side suddenly moved slightly. Hundreds of thousands of fiery, evil mosquitoes suddenly spread out from between her fingers, flying in all directions. At first, the crowd only felt as if some mosquitoes and flies were flying in front of their eyes and didn't pay too much attention. But with the cry of a soldier, a fiery prelude began. This person suddenly spat out a ball of fire from his chest, and it inexplicably spread to the people around him. It was so fast that it caught people off guard, and there was no time to defend. The first soldier who was enveloped by the fire quickly shattered into a pile of bones, falling to the ground with a bang. He was deader than dead in a matter of minutes. This unforeseen event not only scared the 400 to 500 Royal Manor townspeople, but also scared the Doruo soldiers to death. This fire inexplicably started burning from within, burning outwards. It was as if a fire had been poured on a person's heart, abruptly igniting it. The crowd didn't know what was going on and became more and more nervous, unable to control themselves. General Doha shouted angrily, "Don't panic. An enemy has sneaked in." The young deputy general, Gu Er, was experienced and knowledgeable. He immediately sensed that something was wrong. The young man ordered loudly, "Don't panic. Pay attention to whether there are any strange objects around you. Activate your defensive profound artifacts first. Defend, defend." The soldiers of the Luo kingdom shouted in panic. One after another, they activated their defensive Xian weapons and looked around. Guer's judgment was very accurate. He immediately discovered that there seemed to be many tiny mosquitoes around the Doro soldiers. Mosquito. It's a mosquito. Damn it. Activate your defensive barriers. Don't let these mosquitoes get close to you. General Hajuo was so angry that his nose was almost crooked when he saw his soldiers being targeted by these tiny mosquitoes one after another, and dying from the inside out one after another. This was truly an unforeseen event. Before the main forces arrived, they planned to camp here for 1 or 2 days. Unexpectedly, before the battle had even begun, his soldiers had inexplicably attracted a swarm of mosquitoes, and dozens of them had been killed. This really wasn't a good sign. Could this be a sign that the future siege would not be easy to fight? General Hajuo's face darkened as he loudly berated his soldiers. Chapter 5043. Don't roast them with fire. These mosquitoes don't seem to be afraid of fire. Use ice. Freeze them. Yes, freeze them. As soon as the general finished speaking, several streams of water shot towards the fiery, evil mosquitoes flying around in the air. The streams of water quickly froze into icicles in the air, but only a few fiery, evil mosquitoes could be frozen. These little mosquitoes moved very quickly, flapping their wings and flying away. It was a fool's dream to want to freeze all of them. General Hajuo saw the mess in front of him and could not help but take a deep breath. He shouted angrily, "A bunch of good-for-nothings. I told you to freeze them. Didn't you hear me? Faster, faster." Icicles. Crackle. An icicle formed by condensing water into ice exploded in front of the general, turning into ice crystals that fluttered in the air. The general was so angry that he shouted, "I told you to train hard every day, but you can't even do something as simple as condensing water into ice. When you have nothing to do, you brag to me that you're a great spiritualist, a great spiritualist. When I really need you to fight, you're useless." While he was cursing nonstop, Guer walked up with a serious expression. "General, these mosquitoes must have been released by someone. We must get rid of the spy in the crowd as soon as possible. Otherwise, these fiery, evil mosquitoes will keep coming." If they were resting in their camp and secretly released a group of fiery, evil mosquitoes in the middle of the night, General Hajuo could not help but shrink his neck. When the soldiers received the general's signal, they hurriedly raised the clubs in their hands and swung them at the crowd. "We can't waste any more time," General Hajuo said coldly. "Since these people are unwilling to cooperate with us, then we'll deal with them together." Originally, he had wanted to use a portion of them to feed the 2 mid-level zombie puppets, while the rest of them will be selected to be strong or clever to be properly modified. But now, it seemed that there was no time. He could not let this continue. Otherwise, he did not know how many of his soldiers would be left under the torture of these fiery, evil mosquitoes. If he could not find the spy, he would kill everyone present. They were just a bunch of stupid Chinese anyway. It did not matter how many he killed. A cold light flashed in Hajuo's eyes. As soon as he gave the order, a few hot-blooded soldiers of the country of Doro raised the iron spears in their hands and charged at the women and children in the front row. If it had sunk, how could those people still be alive? The townsfolk of Wangzhuang town immediately cried out in alarm. More than a dozen young and strong men were looking everywhere for suitable weapons, wanting to risk their lives to fight against the vicious soldiers of the country of Duo-Luo. At this moment, a loud boom was heard. It was as if a thunderclap had exploded on the ground. All of a sudden, the group of soldiers in the front row exploded. This time, it was as if a flower had bloomed and the ground was dyed red. The explosion of the divine power ball shocked everyone present. More than a dozen soldiers of the kingdom of Daluo, who were caught off guard, were blown away. Their limbs were crippled as they hung on the stone pillars. General Hajuo's pupils constricted as he shouted, "Defensive shield! Defensive shield!" Gu-er roared as well. Swoosh! In front of Hajuo and Gu-er, 3 rows of shield walls immediately appeared, protecting them firmly behind them. Hajuo was cursing in his heart. This battle is a disastrous loss. Chapter 5044. The worst thing was that he didn't even know who the enemy was or where they were hiding. At this moment, he still couldn't tell. So many soldiers had died in the vanguard. How was he going to explain this to the state preceptor? When he thought of the state preceptor's stern face, General Hajuo couldn't help but shudder. His entire body trembled. At this moment, rows of Doruo soldiers from half-squatting to standing upright surrounded the two of them. They erected hundreds of defensive shields in front of them and roared in unison. Pay attention to your defenses. The anger in General Hajuo's heart was about to materialize into swordlight. Which friend is stirring up trouble in our small town? Why don't you show yourself for a chat? As soon as Ha-Duo finished his sentence, he saw a ball of divine power flying towards them. It was like a ball of divine power was being tossed around. With a loud boom, it smashed into their shields. Countless Doruo soldiers used their bodies to withstand the explosion of the ball of divine power. The soldiers in the front row who were bearing the most weight were immediately affected by the explosion of the ball of divine power. They all spat out mouthfuls of blood and barely supported their shield-bearing bodies. Hajuo's face darkened as he looked at the Wang Zhuang townsfolk huddled together. Fire the arrows. He wanted to see if this person would still hide among a bunch of useless commoners and fish in troubled waters. He was trying to force them out of hiding. Behind the defensive shields, hundreds of archers immediately surged forward. They all knocked their bows and aimed in the direction of the townsfolk. The old mayor trembled as he pushed his children and grandchildren beside him. He cried out in alarm, "Go, go, go quickly!" The townsfolk finally reacted. When they saw that the enemy was about to shoot them indiscriminately, they hurriedly scattered in all directions. They stumbled and crawled as they fled for their lives. Thump, thump, thump. A dozen or so townsfolk fled a few meters before they suddenly realized that there were 4 invisible barriers erected around the meeting place. Commoners like them couldn't see clearly at all. At this moment, they were like a group of trapped beasts trapped in these 4 tall, invisible barriers. The round-faced girl let out a cry of alarm and kicked the barrier in front of her. He kicked until his feet hurt, but he still couldn't push away that invisible barrier. At this time, many people rushed to the girl's side, kicking, hitting, biting, and headbutting. However, no matter how hard they tried, they were still firmly trapped in this predicament, unable to resist the cruel fate. Was this the fate of ordinary people? Don't do anything yet. Look, look, look. The round-faced girl suddenly tugged at the arm of a woman beside her. The woman was holding a child who was only a few years old. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked like she had gone mad. Now that he was pulled by the round-faced girl, his mind became a little clearer. He turned his head to look in the direction she was pointing. The place where 400 to 500 townspeople had gathered was now left with only 7 people after they scattered like birds and beasts. 7 men and women with crude appearances. They looked very ordinary. Judging from their appearance, these 7 people were about 30 years old. The one standing at the front was a short woman with a round face full of freckles. "Who are you people?" Ha-Duo frowned as he looked coldly at the 7 people. Were they the ones who secretly released the fire mosquitoes and smashed people with the god power pearls? They really looked like a group of village women. There was nothing special about them at all. No wonder no one could recognize them when they were mixed in with the crowd. Chapter 5045. You're finally willing to come out. Ha Duo sneered. I thought you wanted to continue mingling with the crowd. He raised his hand to instruct the archers to aim cautiously at the 7 people on the battlefield. Do you have any more god power pearls to throw? Huh. Ha Duo snorted, expressing his disdain and dissatisfaction very purely. I don't need to use god power pearls to deal with trash like you, Arbor said coldly as she hooked her finger forward. She just needed to summon a holy beast. Standing behind her, Zwalan couldn't help but twitch his mouth. When the little stoic was exquisite and adorable in the past, she would definitely look very good doing this, but now she was like a chubby little oil barrel. Her face was full of pockmarks and freckles, so she looked very ugly no matter what she did. Suddenly, 2 figures flashed, and 2 slender and naturally handsome figures appeared next to the little stoic. Jojo, are you summoning hubby? The little stoic looked back in bewilderment. A pair of deformed mung bean eyes suddenly lit up. Her lotus had finished absorbing ancient Emolien's soul pearl, but that was to be expected. Under the main planet's 12-fold time flow, the absorption of soul pearls should be very fast. Jojo, why didn't you summon me for a fight? This venerable one's hands and feet are about to turn stiff from idleness. The venerable peach blossom immortal glanced at the other side. He saw a large group of Luo soldiers using defensive shields to form 3 human walls and vigilantly watching them. Arbor was about to walk toward them when she suddenly looked down at her appearance. She pinched her chubby bucket-like waist and instantly felt like the sky was falling down. What was going on? Why did she become so ugly? She inexplicably felt like she didn't even have the right to walk to them. She couldn't use this damned transformation talisman next time. How could it randomly transform and not recover within 12 hours? Before she compared herself to Zwalan and the other ugly people, she didn't feel any harm when she stood next to them. But now the harm immediately came. Arbor stopped in her tracks. She couldn't stand Mo Lien's tendency to float to her side. She didn't move, so those 2 people moved over. Jojo, what's wrong? What was with the little stoic's expression? She was looking at them oddly. Jojo, your husband came out of closed-door training early. Don't tell me you're not surprised at all? Mo Lien hooked her little hand naturally as he spoke. In the end, the little stoic abruptly slapped his hand away. Before Mo Lien could react, this fellow gestured to her current appearance and asked with a sullen expression, Did you guys not notice how different I am compared to usual? Were these 2 blind? Not a single one of them was surprised to see her like this. What's the big deal? Mo Lien grabbed her hand and said nonchalantly, You're my Jojo, anyway. No matter what you become, you're still my Jojo. Zwalan, whose mouth was stuffed with dog food, rolled his eyes and roared. Are we still fighting or not? Just looking at it made him sick and annoyed. For a childless old bachelor like him, who had been a bachelor for several hundred years, he seriously couldn't understand what was so good about a wife. Women were creatures who liked to make a fuss and shout all day long. They were so noisy and annoying. In any case, he wouldn't find a wife in this lifetime. Fight! Arbor nodded and pointed forward with 2 fingers. Zwalan, you were so powerful when you attacked us at Forget River. Now, you should use 1/10 of your strength to deal with them. Chapter 5046. Why are you still harping on the river of forgetfulness? It could have been over long ago. Zwalan suddenly leaped forward, revealing his beast form. He had a human body and a snake tail, and his magnificent scales rubbed against the ground. With a flick of his tail, his robust tail heavily smashed into the human shield wall with a bang. A dozen or so sounds of blood being spat out were heard in succession. Zwalan's snake tail smashed down and immediately sent 2 Doluo soldiers flying. Although there were people rushing up from behind to fill in the gaps, the entire shield wall was already on the verge of collapsing due to the overly chaotic movements. Hajuo sharply stared in Arbor's direction. He took a deep breath and shouted with a gloomy expression, This human snake's cultivation is very high. Even I can't see through his realm. Damn it. They were originally stationed at Wangzhuang Town to wait for Grand State Preceptor Larry's arrival. The defenses in this area had already been set up, so they only needed to follow the Grand State Preceptor's orders and capture some people to transform while waiting. Think about it. How delightful would it be to turn those foolish citizens of the Divine Province into a bunch of brainless monsters that only knew how to obey orders and let them bite each other as they pleased? But now their plan to cultivate zombies had just begun, and it seemed like it would be interrupted by these people in front of them. They had to hold on until Grand State Preceptor Larry came to rescue them. General Hajuo silently repeated this 3 times in his mind before revealing a stiff smile. Friends, don't listen to his nonsense. Zhualanshan attack. Arbor habitually gave orders. When the latter heard the little stoic shout, he also inexplicably charged forward out of habit. As he charged, he inwardly cursed himself as a dog. He didn't expect himself to become so docile and obedient after following the stoic for a short while. The human snake charged into the enemy's camp like a giant descending. Wherever its long tail swept past, it swept away everything in its path. No one in Duoluo could withstand this sacred beast attack, and they all retreated step by step. Mo Lien grasped Arbor's small hand and said softly, "These people brazenly set up a stronghold in Wangzhuang, so they should be relying on talisman formations." Arbor nodded slightly and glanced at the transparent barrier around them. What kept the townsfolk out of the meeting place was the defensive barrier that had been set up. She had been somewhat curious since the beginning. This talisman grandmaster had spent a lot of money to set up such a large defensive wall, but why didn't he show himself? She smashed them with the divine power bead and asked the snake to bully them like this, but she still couldn't force this talisman master to show himself. It could be imagined that this person's relationship with the country of Daluo shouldn't be that good. It didn't matter. She was just curious about talisman masters. Every time she met a talisman master, she always thought that it would be best to have a talisman competition with them. This way, she would be able to have a better understanding of her own talisman skills she silently practiced according to the Golden Talisman Jade Tome. Most of the time, she felt too lonely. If he could have a few sparring partners, he would feel that it would be good. In fact, whoever became her sparring partner would have 8 lifetimes of bad luck. This fellow used the long-lost talisman techniques from the Golden Talisman Jade Tome to crush others. Every time she was done, she would feel that the other party was too weak and reveal a regretful expression. Ever since this fellow's reputation as a talisman master spread throughout the 3 provinces, very few people wanted to compete with her in talismans. No one was a masochist as Wulan Mountain's snake tail swept past, and the power was like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, instantly crushing the defensive shield formation. The 4th watch made up for the 2nd watch, and the 6th watch was completed. Chapter 5047. Many of the Luo soldiers were rolling on the ground as they screamed in pain. General Hajuo's face darkened as he said in a low voice, "Retreat." He felt that if they continued to stay here, the 5,000 soldiers under his command would all die here. They would all be destroyed by someone. In order to preserve their strength, they had to endure for now for the sake of long-term benefits. Hajuo gritted his teeth and raised his hand. He whispered to the young General Gu heir, "State Preceptor Larry might not be able to make it on time. We must retreat quickly." If they retreated now, they could still save 2,000 to 3,000 soldiers. If they continued to dawdle, no matter how many people they had, they would not be enough to be wiped out by the snake. As he spoke, the snake smashed a few more Luo soldiers to death. Hajuo saw that something was wrong and hurriedly shouted, "Retreat! Retreat! Retreat!" Guer's face was cold as he bellowed. The panicked soldiers of the Luo kingdom hurriedly fled backward, like flies that had been pinched off, disorderly and disorderly. The entire banquet hall was instantly filled with a cacophony of shouts. It was a complete mess. At this time, no one had the time to care about others. They were too busy running for their lives. The soldiers fled like a swarm of bees, but they were soon blocked by 4 invisible barriers. General Haddo leaped onto a muscular black wolf, and the rest of the Doro wolf team hurriedly followed suit. Following their general, They rushed to the transparent defensive wall. Hajuo took out a set of jade talismans from his sleeves and threw them forward. Dozens of jade talismans formed a circle in the air and scattered in all directions. The barrier in front of them disappeared without a trace. Arbor stood there expressionlessly and watched Hajuo's series of actions. He sneered in his heart. It seemed that this talisman array master was a cautious person. He did not show himself, and only gave the general the key to open and close the talisman array. But one thing was for sure. This master must be hiding nearby and watching. After all, anyone would be curious after setting up such a large talisman array. Let's go. When Hato saw that the barrier in front of him had opened, he patted the wolf's head without another word. He rode on the large black wolf and charged forward. His speed was so fast that even the young General Guer, who was following closely behind him, could not keep up with his speed. General Haduo had left them a short distance behind. The soldiers of the kingdom of Doruo all followed closely behind Captain Wolf, running without thinking. They only wanted to get far away from that crazy snake's attack range. This human snake was simply unparalleled. Without a second word, it would smash anyone it saw. Wherever its huge tail swept past, almost everyone would be turned into a pile of meat paste. Quick! Guer patted the wolf's back and urged loudly. There was a trace of anxiety in his eyes. He knew very well that Grandmaster Chu's talisman array was quite powerful. Even if he had the key to open the defensive wall, it would only take him a few minutes to pass through. After a few minutes, the defensive wall would close up again, sealing the remaining people inside. "Huh!" Guer snorted coldly, a hint of ridicule flashing in his eyes. At that time, it would be like catching a turtle in a jar. As long as Grandmaster Chu sent them on their way outside the talisman array, they would have a good time. Apart from that human snake whose realm could not be determined, everyone else would be in for a bad time. Chapter 5048. The kingdom of Luo's soldiers followed Wolf Troop as they charged out of the gap in the defensive wall. They didn't even turn their heads or dare to take another look behind them as they continued to dash forward. Zhualanshan was a bit dumbfounded. He slithered to Arbor's side with his snake tail and asked in confusion, "Are we going to let them leave just like that? How's that possible?" The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes at him. "Of course our Jojo has a backup plan." Zhualanshan nodded with a sluggish expression and said, "Let me think. The little stoic isn't an open-minded person. How could she let these people leave just like that?" Arbor turned to glare at him. Emollien's mouth twitched, and he rebuked Zhualanshan with a taut face. "Don't speak if you don't know how to speak." Mutes like to talk, and every time they spoke, it always sounded off. Actually, Zhualanshan's original intention was to say that the little stoic was someone who repaid kindness with kindness and enmity with vengeance. So she shouldn't have let that General Hajuo leave just like that. He felt that this action didn't seem like the little stoic's personality. In the end, his words took a 180-degree turn, and he was referring to this person who didn't use words to convey his meaning. Zhualanshan shut his mouth aggrievedly, but he was very puzzled on the inside. This little girl was truly too difficult to handle. Like the weather in March, that little face of hers really changed on a whim. She was fine just now, but now she immediately tensed up. "Ignore him. He's uncultured." Emollien pulled his wife's hand and said quietly, "Later, we'll find him a teacher and properly educate him on popular culture. Tell him not to use these idioms carelessly in the future." Arbor pursed his small mouth and nodded reluctantly. She looked up at her husband and then lowered her head to look at herself, a faint trace of worry rising in her heart. Her current appearance as a fat winter melon, why did she feel so disgusted standing next to her husband? The little stoic pulled a long face and pushed the man. "Move over a bit." His Highness the Crown Prince blinked and looked at his wife in incomprehension. "Why? Not really compatible. How could not be?" Crown Prince Imo abruptly reached out and picked up his wife. "Wife, you match me no matter what you look like." Arbor widened his deformed, beady eyes and glared at him angrily. He raised his little hand and smacked him on the head. "Don't mess around. I'm not fooling around." Prince Imo blinked and lowered his head to rub her hair. We've been married for so many years. Jojo, before he could finish his sentence, he felt a force pushing against Jojo's lower abdomen, trying to push him away. Yin was shocked and didn't dare to resist. She could only allow the force to push her back 2 steps. She glanced at her daughter-in-law, who was 2 steps away, with an aggrieved expression. Arbor couldn't help but want to laugh. He raised his hand to touch his stomach and snorted. Baby Emo doesn't like you. This was not the first time he had pushed his father away. The pitiful His Highness the Crown Prince despised him so much even before his child was born. On the other side, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal truly couldn't stand it anymore. He patted Zhualanshan next to him and said, "Let's go ahead and take a look. Those people should be back by now." Which people should be back by now? Zhualanshan followed him in bewilderment. They didn't go far before they saw dust swirling in the distance. A large pack of black wolves was carrying a group of panic-stricken Doruo soldiers as they retreated. It was as if there was a ghost behind them. Chapter 5049. The group of people fled in all directions, not caring about their image at all. Some even crawled 3 times with each step and rolled on the ground, as if their legs were so weak that they couldn't even lift them up. Zhualanshan was baffled. He looked at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal in confusion. What's wrong with him? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a large swarm of things rushing over from behind the Luo soldiers. From afar, it looked like a black ocean, making one's scalp tingle uncontrollably. The rolling little sand scorpions rushed over in great jubilation. Like a tide, they surrounded the soldiers of the kingdom of Daluo. Soon, the thousands of Luo soldiers, as well as Haduo and Guer's group, were all trapped in a tight encirclement. They kept moving forward, shrinking the encirclement. Fuck, what are these things? Zhualanshan hurriedly retreated a few steps, his scalp tingling. Boom, 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 boom. The stone slabs around them suddenly flew up and stacked on top of each other, quickly building 4 high walls around them. They rotated noisily, trapping everyone in these stone slabs. Haduo and his group's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. They cautiously moved left and right, looking back and forth. They saw that the original invisible defensive wall had been replaced by stone slabs. These stone slabs that had suddenly erupted from the ground were now, like moving city walls, stacked up from top to bottom, left to right, trapping everyone firmly in this area. The townspeople of Wangzhuang Town were huddled in a corner. The 400 to 500 people wanted nothing more than to shrink into a speck of dust, not wanting to attract the attention of these people in front of them. These cultivators could easily destroy the heavens and the earth. The entire town could be razed to the ground by them. They hoped that the immortals' fight wouldn't affect them. In the eyes of these cultivators, the commoners of Wangzhuang Town were probably ants. Arbor looked coldly at General Haduo. The latter rode on the big black wolf and met her eyes. He couldn't help but be intimidated by the cold light in her eyes, and his heart trembled slightly. Guer wasn't as calm as Haduo. He couldn't help but shout when he saw the scene before him. "Don't think you can trap us like this. Grand State Preceptor Larry is almost here with his men. Once our main forces arrive, all of you will die. Grand Preceptor Larry, Grand Preceptor Larry." When all the soldiers of the country of Doruo heard this person's name, it was as if they were injected with chicken blood. They clenched their fists and shouted out in an uproar. Arbor waved his hand and released a cloud of poison powder. The voices of the Doruo soldiers immediately stopped. Everyone was speechless. "You're so long-winded," Arbor said impatiently. "Search his soul and see when that Grandmaster Lila will roll over. If he was fast, he could wait for him here and catch them all in one fell swoop. If there were still a few more days of travel, then there was no need to wait. Who would have the time to wait here all day for them to attack?" Yin really wanted to remind his wife that she called him Lolly the Great State Preceptor, not Lila. However, the impatient expression on his wife's face made him silently give up. Forget about this kind of small matter. Whatever his wife says is right. His wife can call him whatever she wants. I don't think there's a need to search his soul. Zhualanshan frowned and said with a firm expression, There are no signs of any large army within a radius of several hundred miles. Chapter 50-50. He's a liar. Jojo, he's lying to you. He's lying to you. No one came here at all. He's just stalling for time. What Grand Preceptor Lila? There's no such person. Zhualanshan hurriedly slandered. Damned liar. Arbor flew into a rage when he heard this. He slapped the stupefied Gu'er across the air. How dare you lie to Jojo? Arbor slapped Gu'er's face in anger. Gu'er's face immediately tilted heavily to the left. 5 fingerprints appeared on his face. He was still in a daze from his slap and had yet to react. Prince Imo hurriedly shouted, Jojo, don't move. Let me do it. As he spoke, he had already flown over like a rabbit. While he landed a dozen punches on Gu'er, he didn't forget to turn around and send a flying kiss to his expressionless wife, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, who was standing at the side, couldn't help but raise his hand to cover his face. He thought to himself, Emollien's skin is getting thicker and thicker. Now it's getting worse. Acting cute, my foot. Just looking at it makes my eyes burn. Arbor was speechless. What should I do when my husband has no bottom line? However, my husband looks so good when he smiles. He's like a flower that needs to be cared for and nurtured. He'll definitely grow stronger and stronger in the future. Jojo has to work hard to nurture him. He can't let the flower grow crooked. While he was pondering, Student Imo had already landed dozens of punches, knocking the unlucky Gu'er off the wolf's back. He fell to the ground in a tragic manner. His tumble caused his head to land on the dirt floor with no stone tiles on his face. When he ate a mouthful of dust, his nose, mouth, and face were all broken. Gu'er howled miserably several times as he struggled to get up, but Crown Prince Imo swiftly kicked him down with a swift kick. Gu'er's eyes stung. He had the urge to cry. Oh my God, who can save me? What if I encounter a lunatic with extremely strong, killing power? Arbor coughed softly and waved his hand. Stop. Listen to what he has to say. Emollien stealthily retracted her long leg and lowered her head to look at Gu'er, who had been trampled into the mud by her. She snorted and said, Don't pretend to be dead. If you continue to pretend, I'll really kill you. Everyone was speechless. Gu'er struggled to raise his head. He looked extremely miserable. Half of his face was covered in bruises, and his eyes were almost squeezed into 2 slits. Grand State Preceptor Larry, his original plan was to stop Wang Zhuangzhen today, Gu'er said in a trembling voice, his face full of helplessness. This time, he didn't dare to speak carelessly. After all, in the other party's camp, other than the extremely powerful Snake Man, this crazy person in front of him was also very powerful. Gu'er lay there and looked up at the other party. He couldn't help but feel that this psychopath's aura and consciousness were so strong that he could crush him with just a finger. Even an ant is nothing more than this, Gu'er thought dejectedly. Facing such a powerful person, he really couldn't muster up the slightest thought of resisting. Arbor sniffed and thought for a moment. You mean your leader didn't keep the appointment? Yes, esteemed madam. Gu'er nodded and answered honestly. Emollien suddenly frowned. Arbor had interacted with him for a long time and was familiar with his words and actions. Seeing his frown, he knew that something was wrong. He quickly walked over and asked in a low voice, What's wrong? Is there a problem? Emollien nodded gravely. These people deliberately stayed here to delay us. Chapter 50-51. Arbor was a smart person who grasped the gist of things. He immediately understood after hearing Emollien's words. As it turned out, that Grand Preceptor Lila purposely left these cannon fodder here to delay them. Therefore, this Lila had actually long calculated that they would definitely rush back to deal with the situation in Dragon Flame City after hearing about it. He purposely set up an extremely conspicuous stronghold at the foot of the imperial capital to lure them here as a delaying tactic. Your Highness, then let's hurry back to the city now. Shenwu hastily asked. If something happened to Dragon Flame City, the entire Divine Province would be shaken, and the current peaceful days would no longer exist. As a citizen of the Divine Province, he had long been accustomed to the current peace and prosperity. He truly didn't wish for anyone to disrupt the current good times. This tiny kingdom of Daluo dared to scheme against the imperial capital of the divine province. What kind of confidence supported him to do such a foolish thing? Arbor silently took out a transportation talisman matrix. Let's go. GC, Old Joe, and the others suddenly twitched their mouths, and they all revealed bitter expressions. The little crown princess was going to activate the directional damned transportation mode again this time. They hoped it wouldn't directly transport them to the enemy's main camp. Hu Jinshun chuckled mischievously and flashed to Arbor's side. Jojo, I like this transportation talisman matrix the most. We don't have to walk a long way and arrive in the blink of an eye. It's effortless. Arbor nodded in agreement. At the same time, he glanced at GC and the others in confusion. The transportation talisman matrix this darling made was so fast and convenient. Why did these people look constipated when they saw her take out the transportation talisman matrix? Could it be that this transportation talisman matrix wasn't fast and stable? Jojo, it's their stupidity. They don't know what's good for them. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal saw through the little stoic's thoughts with a glance and walked up with a grin. Let's go. Then, these people... Arbor turned to look at Hajuo's group, whose expressions were unsightly. These small soldiers of Daluo were completely defenseless in front of this humanoid sacred beast of Mount Zwalon. So as long as they wanted to, they could annihilate all these people here. Haduo stared at the little stoic nervously. He truly didn't expect Grand State Preceptor Larry to be so deceitful as to leave them here to stall for time for him. The Grand State Preceptor had treated them as abandoned pawns from the very beginning, leaving them here to die. Emolien glanced indifferently at Haduo and the others. Settle down in this array formation. First, Jojo. Tell Ton to escort these people back. As for how to deal with these prisoners of war, that was for the Emperor to worry about. The Crown Prince expressed that he and his wife were too lazy to care. Arbor nodded and drew several binding talismans in the air. With a flick of his little hand, he pushed them into the surrounding air. A double confinement glyph formation was set up on the originally solid defensive wall. Snake. The Snake Man was dumbfounded. He turned to look at Arbor and said, I have a name. My name is Zualanshan. Leave a wisp of your soul, remembrance here, and watch over them. Arbor didn't waste words with him and got straight to the point. With a wisp of the Lanshan's soul guarding this place, even if Hajuo's group wanted to make a move, they couldn't possibly hide it from the Snake Man's eyes. Got it. The Snake Man pursed his lips and pulled out a wisp of his soul, remembrance, to leave inside the confinement glyph formation. With the Snake Man guarding this place, Hajuo Ghoul and the others couldn't possibly escape. Chapter 5052. Haduo drooped his head dejectedly. He was currently still straddling that large black wolf, but this wolf wasn't as fierce as before. Under the endless pressure of a human-shaped sacred beast, the wolf's head also completely drooped. It sprawled on the ground and whimpered, its voice sounding like a kitten or puppy, comical and pitiful. Arbor tossed aside the transportation talisman matrix and led the Crown Prince's group forward a few steps. Everyone's figures were immediately enveloped by the light of transportation, and they disappeared from the talisman matrix with a whoosh. After everyone's figures disappeared, a wretched and skinny old man with a protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks appeared outside the defensive wall. He raised his bony hand that was as withered as a chicken's claw and lightly touched the thick layer of defensive wall. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, such powerful talisman techniques. There were even double confinement talisman matrices set up inside this defensive wall. Such extravagance truly wasn't something a minor talisman practitioner could do. This person's gaze involuntarily flickered, and a complicated expression flitted across his eyes. It was a pity that such a young and talented little girl couldn't be used by them. It truly was a pity that she died. Just as he thought this, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He abruptly turned his head and met a pair of beady eyes head-on. The pitch-black light was like the stars in the night sky, sparkling with a dense halo. Chu Qingfei practically made a prompt decision and made a judgment in less than a second. He scooped up a handful of red powder and sprinkled it at the little stoic's head. Jojo, Mo Lien, and Hu Shurchen's faces simultaneously darkened. They pushed forth layers of water-like energy, directly deflecting the poison powder master Chu sprinkled in front of Arbor. Arbor's eyes instantly narrowed sharply, and he sized up the man in front of him. "Who are you?" You give people a sense of familiarity. Arbor raised his hand to block Mo Lien and Hu Shurchen's attacks, and he sized up the person in front of him again. "I remember you." Her voice was faint, and in Chu Qingfei's eyes, it was as if she was a malicious spirit that walked out of hell. "When you poisoned me, you also quickly threw out a puppet charm. Did you think I didn't see it?" In fact, Arbor had already discovered Master Chu's scheme the moment he made his move. The poison was just a cover. The talisman that made people lose their minds was the real trump card. "You are that poison master and charm master," Arbor said coldly. "You are from the Clear Sky sect." Chu Qingfei shuddered. "You were the one who poisoned and cursed Shagua and his team during the Shuntian school tournament." Miss Qiao had a good memory, but she really couldn't remember many people, especially at that banquet. She had only swept a glance at most of the talented scholars and beauties she had bumped into. She might not be able to remember many of their faces and names. However, if you were to say that she had a bad memory, she could remember everything that had happened so many years ago clearly. As long as someone had tried to kill her, as long as she had caught the person's weak point, she would never forget it. She remembered all of them deeply and would not miss a single detail. "Your disciple calls you Master Chu," Arbor said coldly. "Master Chu, the Clear Sky sect is indeed under Halm Master Mu of Tianyin." What a mooching ya! She was already half dead as an experimental subject on Snow Island, but she still hadn't given up on her evil intentions. "Add more tomorrow. Sleep first. Add more tomorrow. Maybe 8. Chapter 5053. Seize him. Arbor pointed at Chu Qingfei with a cold glint in her eyes. She was going to personally interrogate this filthy thing. Although Zhualanshan was baffled and completely couldn't understand what Sir Jojo was saying, his reaction speed was very nimble. Once Sir Jojo gave the order, he immediately charged forward on his own accord. At the same time, a ruthless glint shot out of Chu Qingfei's eyes, and he shouted, "Bring it on!" In the blink of an eye, Chu Qingfei flung out several talismans glowing with purple light from his pocket. He flicked the talismans open, and his figure instantly disappeared from everyone's sight. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's jaw nearly dropped, and he muttered, "Hee hee." He ran away. What kind of master was this? Where was his shame? Did he have no shame as a master? He ran away just like that, and didn't even have the courage to confront Jojo. Moreover, when this person shouted before running away, everyone thought he was about to explode and make some big move, but in the end, Mo Lien twitched his mouth, and he lowered his head to glance at his wifey. However, his wifey's expression was very calm, as if she wasn't the least bit surprised or angry about Chu Qingfei's escape. She suddenly extended a finger and extended a second finger, then a third. When the third finger appeared, everyone only saw a flash of light before their eyes. That idiot Chu Qingfei returned with a bewildered expression. This idiot stood in front of the Serpent Man and stared at him in the eye. Then he crossed his arms in front of his chest and roared with a flushed face, "Bring it on, little one." He disappeared again. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal couldn't resist slapping his thigh and guffawing. Fuck, what was wrong with this person? If you wanted to escape, then escape. Why did you have to shout so loudly before escaping? Was this to encourage yourself or to show off? Mo Lien's mouth twitched, and he lowered his head to look at his wifey. He saw that she didn't bat an eyelid and continued to extend one finger after another. When she extended the third finger, sure enough, Chu Qingfei, this old fellow, returned again. With a swish, when this old man appeared in front of the Serpent Man again, the Serpent Man was on guard this time. He kept looking at the little stoic with his head tilted. When he saw the little stoic raise her third finger, he was prepared to attack at any time. Therefore, the moment the light and shadow flashed in front of him, The serpent's huge tail swung out and wrapped around Chu Chengfei's body, pinning him to the ground. Ah! Chu Chengfei let out a blood-curdling scream. He felt as if his internal organs were about to be torn apart by the snake's tail. It was too difficult for him. Master Chu was on the verge of tears. He really didn't expect that such a small mission he had accepted would actually make him face these fiends in front of him so miserably. If he had known that he would encounter Arbor and the others, he would never have accepted this mission. He had already seen how powerful Mo Lien was when he was underground in Greyfield Village. That was a ruthless character who had destroyed his physical body with a single strike, and he had risked his life to escape with his divine soul. The moment he saw Prince Mo, Chu Chengfei had already thought of retreating. When he discovered that the barrel-waisted little woman in front of him was originally Arbor's transformation, the fear in his heart deepened. Afterwards, he simply didn't think of confronting them head-on. His only thought was to escape. Therefore, he fainted and hastily used a transportation talisman matrix to escape. Unfortunately, he failed to teleport twice. Chapter 50-54. It was as if the teleportation array had suddenly lost its effect. No matter how he teleported, the light flashed, and he returned to his original spot. It was as if there was an invisible rope that hooked him, making it impossible for him to teleport. How would Chu Chengfei know that when Arbor set up the trap array, she had already taken precautions? She used the power of space contained in her body to open the space restriction here. Anyone who entered the range of her trap array would be controlled by the space restriction. If she didn't take you out herself, even if you used the teleportation talisman or the teleportation array, you wouldn't be able to get yourself out of the space restriction here. There was no other reason. There was probably no one in the entire continent who could resist her martial ant space restriction. She had also studied the space restriction that her master had taught her in her spare time. In just a short period of time, it was almost impossible to study the essence of it. The deeper she studied it, the more she felt that the space restriction was extensive and profound, extremely mysterious. The space restriction that she was using now was still the power that she had absorbed from the small silver ball in the Phoenix Woods. She hadn't used it all before, but now that she had opened the space restriction, she had almost used it up. The remaining power was estimated to be only enough for 5 teleportations. However, the small silver ball that her master had given her contained a vast amount of space restriction. What she had extracted from the Phoenix Woods was only 1/10,000th of it. After using it up, she could still draw more from the small ball, Sir Jojo thought to himself. Chu Chengfei's miserable howl pulled Jojo's thoughts back from the distance. Glancing at him, he snorted and waved his hand to let the snake woman pull Chu Chengfei over. Zhualanshan didn't care about a weak human like Chu Chengfei at all. He directly rolled and swung his snake tail, and with a bang, threw Chu Chengfei in front of Arbor as if he was a dead dog. "Don't throw him to death," Arbor roared. Then she took small steps and hurried over to Chu Chengfei. She took out a pair of white silk gloves from her pocket and put them on. Then she grabbed Chu Chengfei's hair and pulled him in front of her. That rough action didn't look much gentler than the snake woman. Everyone couldn't help but mutter in their hearts. Arbor asked coldly, "Tell me, did Mu Qingya send you here?" It was time to send that damned Mu Qingya on her way. Arbor thought with a cold expression. He raised his hand and took out a communication jade talisman from his inner world. He immediately wrote 2 lines of small words and sent them to Yellow Crane Fairy on the snowy island. "Don't keep Mu Qingya alive. Deal with her." She was really fed up with this woman jumping out and biting her every now and then. Although she was only an ordinary person, her methods were unique. Not only could she drive the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord, Gung Pengcheng, to work for her, but she also had so many followers of the Clear Sky sect who were all extremely fanatical about her. It seemed that Jojo's life would only be peaceful if all these talents were dead. What Arbor didn't know was that he had wronged Mu Qingya this time. At this time, how could Mu Qingya have the ability to strategize to this extent and send Chu Chengfei here to block Arbor? Chu Chengfei himself didn't know that he would meet Arbor in Wangzhuang town on the outskirts of the imperial capital. If he knew that Arbor would come, he would have run away 800 years ago. Previously, he hid outside the talisman array he set up to watch. When he saw Emolien from afar, he didn't dare to move. Chapter 50-55. It was only because he saw Arbor and the others leave using the transportation talisman matrix that he dared to sneak over to check on the situation. Who would have thought that Arbor wouldn't play by the rules at all and suddenly turn around to catch him by surprise? Thinking about it, this person must have done this on purpose. In order to lure him, a talisman formation master, out, he deliberately activated the transportation talisman matrix and pretended to teleport away. In reality, they didn't leave at all. When Chu Chengfei thought of this, he wrung his hands even more and inwardly cursed himself for being as stupid as a pig. With several decades of life experience, he actually fell for a youngster's trick and fell into his hands. Arbor took out a normal spirit sword and patted Chu Chengfei's head. Tell me honestly, did Mu Qingya send you to deal with me? If you tell me the truth, I might consider letting you off. Chu Chengfei's lips trembled, and he hastily shook his head. This matter has nothing to do with Hall Master Mu. The little stoic's fist landed on his left eye. Does it have anything to do with it? Yes. It has something to do with it. It was Hall Master Mu who sent me here. Everyone speechlessly twitched their mouths. The little stoic, this was no different from beating someone into confessing. Most importantly, this Master Chu didn't seem to be a particularly unyielding person. After being punched 3 times by the little stoic, he immediately turned on her. Following her temperament, he would say whatever she asked. In reality, there was a high possibility that this matter really had nothing to do with that Hall Master Mu. Poor Mu Qingya. She really was a scapegoat. Arbor's face was gloomy. On his chubby little face, a pair of beady eyes gazed at Master Chu with a cold glint in his eyes. Master Chu couldn't help but shudder again. He kept feeling that if he didn't answer honestly, the sword in this guy's hand would very likely stab into his chest in the next second. I knew it was Mu Qingya who sent someone to do it. She really has a lot of flower escorts. Arbor looked furious and slashed the side of Master Chu's neck with his spirit sword. Speak. Besides you, who else is following Mu Qingya? Are the Clear Sky faction's people all dead? How was he supposed to answer this question? Grandmaster Chu looked at Si Qiao with a bitter expression. He wasn't in charge of the Clear Sky sect's affairs. Although he was a member of the Clear Sky sect, he was actually a member of the Hall of Heavenly Fortune Talisman. The reason why he joined Hall Master Mu's Clear Sky faction was entirely because he would help Hall Master Mu out of the temptation of benefits. It wasn't because he was bewitched by beauty, like the little stoic said. But now, it seemed that this stoic face didn't want to hear any other explanation at all. She had long determined that everyone around Mu Qingya was under her skirt, including him, Chu Chengfei, who was also Hall Master Mu's beloved follower. If the stoic face wanted to think this way, he really didn't have any other ideas. Speak. Clear Sky sect's people, whether they're dead or not, I really don't know. But as far as I know, the vice head of the Clear Sky sect still wants to rescue Hall Master Mu. The little stoic flew into a rage and slapped Chu Chengfei's shoulder. I just knew that if that woman Mu Qingya didn't die, things definitely wouldn't stop. Then didn't you already order your subordinates to kill Hall Master Mu just now? In reality, Hall Master Mu was truly wronged in today's matter. Chu Chengfei thought speechlessly. Chapter 50-56. Right now, he truly didn't want to say anything more to the little stoic. In any case, no matter what he said, it would be wrong. The little stoic was certain that Mu Qingya was behind this. So what could he freaking do? Speak. I'll speak. I'll tell you everything. Chu Chengfei nearly wanted to cry. Why did he feel that it was so difficult to communicate with this woman in front of him? At this time, Chu Chengfei couldn't resist looking at Emolien, who was watching the show from the side. His gaze actually contained a bit of a plea for help. Your Highness, do you still remember this humble one? Emolien glanced at him expressionlessly. I don't remember. Everyone, Chu Chengfei said pitifully, I am Graping Village's Earth Spirit formation, and Mo Yin's brows twitched slightly. When this person mentioned Graping Village and the Earth Spirit formation, Mo Yin's heart couldn't help but jolt. She sized him up and nodded. I remember now. You're a pawn that Tianyun placed in Graping Village to nurture the underground zombies of Graping Village. Back then, you picked up a ready-made formation from a heaven-level Talisman Master's foundation and used someone else's formation to set up your own Earth Spirit formation. The outer layer is the Earth Spirit formation, and the inner layer of defense is the formation set up by that heaven-level Talisman Master. Arbor's eyes suddenly lit up, and he said, Is it that talisman formation that ancestor Xiaoyang set up? This old man was bragging nonsense. He even said that he set up an 18-layer talisman formation that no one could break open. In the end, Mo Yin saw the existence of a holy meridian underneath. Speaking of this, the little stoic recalled that she should find time to receive the holy meridian that ancestor Xiaoyang left her. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a pity to leave such a fat sheep in a place like Graping Village? You're the person whose physical body I destroyed back then? Mo Yin sized up the old man. Currently, his body was tattered and incomplete. It was unknown where he had taken over this body. Compared to his original body, his appearance was even more unsightly than before. Chu Qingfei's tears really flowed down. He nodded repeatedly and said, Your Highness, it's me. I've already been killed by you once. Can you let me go this time? In your dreams, the little stoic threw at him crisply. Everyone couldn't help but want to laugh as they silently glanced at the child. She glared coldly at Grandmaster Chu and snorted during the Shuntian Academy tournament. It was you. She poisoned Shagua of the hippopotamus team and stood behind Mu Qingya for a long time. She poisoned me one moment and cast curses on me the next. She contributed to my life. It's you. The little stoic's roar of, It's you, was extremely forceful, just like 3 heavy hammers that pounded on everyone's hearts. Chu Qingfei's eyebrows twitched, and he hurriedly shook his head in denial. No, it's not what you think. You're still trying to deceive me. Arbor punched the old man's right eye. The old man hastily cried out miserably, Yes, it's indeed me. During the Academy tournament, I poisoned your opponent and also cast a puppet curse. But you broke it very easily, ah. Before the old man could finish speaking, he was slapped silly by the little fellow's slap. Ha! From what you're saying, I broke your puppet curse, so that means I shouldn't be angry, right? No. Hua Chu Qingfei's tears streamed down. Chapter 50-57. His face was truly slapped too painfully. No one could compare to this girl's black-hearted. She only slapped your face until your old face is swollen. The little stoic coldly glared at her deformed, chubby little face and said angrily, You still have the face to cry? Indiscriminately, he did so many wrong things as a lackey for someone else. Yet he still had the face to cry in front of her. He really was promising. Do you have a disciple? Arbor punched her nose. She specially wore a pair of silk gloves, just for when she beat someone up. No. Dirty. Hand. Chu Qingfei's tears and snot flowed down as he bawled bitterly. Crown Princess. Do not hit me anymore, Crown Princess. It truly hurt too much. This little Crown Princess only hit his face. By now, the parents of this body's original owner probably wouldn't recognize their son anymore. Speak honestly, Xiao Mu grumpily roared. Did not know where the Crown Princess's words came from. Chu Qingfei was terribly flustered. Lying there, he could hear his heart beating like a drum, as if it was about to jump out of his chest. His left hand, which was hanging by his side, moved slowly and silently. A light purple talisman was pinched in his sweaty palm. This was his last life-saving talisman. If this talisman was also useless against the little stoic, then he would definitely meet his end here today. Don't pretend anymore. Arbor swept him a disdainful glance and sneered. Other than that time in the school tournament, you specially poisoned Shagua and the others to deal with me. You even followed me from 1,000 miles away with your disciple to Ani Prefecture and lurked around me for more than 10 days. waiting for an opportunity to make a move. And no such thing, Al. Chu Qingfei's mouth was smashed by the little stoic's fist. The corner of his mouth broke, his teeth fell out, and his blood mixed with saliva dripped down. Have you thought it through now? Arbor asked coldly. Chu Qingfei hurriedly nodded. The depression in his heart had already reached its peak. He suddenly moved his finger, but at the same time, Imo Lin flashed forward and stepped on his hand. Crack! With a crisp sound, Chu Qingfei's face twisted in pain. His hand, which was holding a talisman, bent unnaturally and fell weakly to the ground. Arbor looked coldly at the purple talisman floating up, but there was no surprise on his face. With a light flick of her hand, she flicked a few times in the air, and the purple talisman that flew in front of her suddenly broke into pieces and exploded. Pooh! Failing to activate the talisman, Chu Qingfei suffered a powerful backlash. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, there wasn't a single piece of unharmed flesh on his body. His miserable appearance was simply unbearable to look at. Arbor continued to stare at him coldly. You dare to do it, but don't dare to admit it. At that time, you also received Mu Qingya's order to bring your disciple to chase me to Ani Prefecture, right? You are that great talisman master of heavenly fate who's been hiding behind the scenes all this time. Arbor sized him up before shaking her head and muttering to herself, No, you should only be at the Black Rank realm. That great talisman master of heavenly fate's hidden depths isn't just at this realm. Your disciple is thin and small. When we were in Ani Prefecture, we once had him lead the way to find you. Unfortunately, you were as slippery as a loach from beginning to end. By the time we found your residence, it was already empty and you had already fled. Chu Qingfei's face was already ashen. Chapter 50-58. You. He stared at Arbor in fright, as if he hadn't heard her words at all. His entire being was immersed in immense fear. You are. Great curse master. He finally spat out these words. Soon after, he saw a vicious killing intent flash past Arbor's eyes. This young crown prince consort was actually a great talisman practitioner. She had probably kept the vast majority of people in this world in the dark, right? Her identity as a great curse master was, in fact, a great curse master. He was well aware of what that purple talisman of his just now was. It was a life-seizing curse. Right, a curse. And to be able to easily dissolve a profound level life-seizing talisman. Who could she be? She was a curse master, and a great curse master whose rank in the art of curses was a level higher than his. Earth rank? Heaven rank? There is actually such a person in this world who could conceal her identity as a heaven-rank great curse master so well, deceiving everyone. Even he had fallen for her old trick. No wonder Home Master Mu had wanted the little lady to die all these years. But the little lady couldn't die every time. Ha ha ha! What kind of joke was this, wanting to kill a heaven-rank great curse master? Just by relying on those 2 or 3 people. Just by relying on a few mediocre talisman practitioners or curse masters. Could they kill her? It would really be strange if they could. You know too much, Xiao Mu said calmly as before. She didn't seem to be the least bit anxious about her identity as a great curse master being exposed. Chu Qingfei's tears streamed down his face. There was no medicine for regret in this world. Even if there was, the little stoic definitely wouldn't be so kind as to let him take it. He was dead for sure today. Just by looking at her calm expression, he knew that he couldn't be any more dead. I can hand over a strand of my soul to follow your excellency forever. Chu Qingfei suppressed the unwillingness in his heart and stammered. Not everyone has the qualifications to become this crown princess subordinate, Arbor said coldly. His cold voice was like a sharp arrow that stabbed into Chu Qingfei's heart. There was no hope left. Kill him. Arbor stood up and said expressionlessly. This person had made a move against her time and time again. He had even chased her for 1,000 li, from Shuntian Prefecture to Ani Prefecture. His evil intentions had yet to die. For such a person, There was no need to continue to make things difficult for him. What's more, his heart was filled with unwillingness, and he might even counterattack from time to time. How could he be allowed to live? Arbor waved his hand and walked away. A short scream came from behind, and then everything returned to normal. GC, Old Joe, and the other citizens of Sin City all had a serious look in their eyes. Even they didn't dare to casually think about the identity of a Grand Charm Master. They simply didn't dare to make any deep guesses about this mysterious and frightening skill. They didn't have much contact with the little crown princess and only knew that she was a talisman master. Now that they learned that she wasn't just a talisman master, but also a Grand Charm Master at the Earth rank or above, they couldn't help but respect her a bit more. His Highness the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess weren't ordinary people. Fortunately, they had always been obedient and didn't underestimate this Crown Princess. In order to live more comfortably in the future, they definitely had to be more cautious in their actions in the future. Chapter 50-59. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal walked over with a grin and said, "I searched this guy just now. This person is from the Hall of Heavenly Fortune Talismans. The reason he joined the Clear Sky faction is probably because of benefits. Muqingya is truly generous to him. Muqingya already gave him many benefits for that small matter of poisoning Shuntian Prefecture. According to his memories, there are at least 3 people in the Hall of Heavenly Fortune Talismans whose talisman level is higher than his. One of them is his teacher, Great Master Yi. Jojo should have exchanged blows with him before. The other person is called Luo. He's the Vice Hall Master of the Hall of Heavenly Fortune Talismans." Arbor nodded. "I know him. I don't really remember that Great Master Yi. I met this Luo not long ago in the Tianji Mystic Realm. Jojo should have also met Great Master Yi before." Yuan Shichan said with a smile. According to Chu Qingfei's memories, his master, Great Master Yi, has been by young Sir's side for a long time. This young Sir is probably either Eldest Qin or Omega Kitoku. Perhaps we've met before, but he shouldn't be conspicuous, so it's normal that Jojo doesn't remember him. Arbor grasped the little fatty's hand with a very solemn expression. Then there's the other person. It's their hall master of the Talisman's Hall. Yuan Shichan smiled faintly. This person's identity is very mysterious. Even Chu Qingfei, who is Great Master Ye's disciple, has never seen this person before. According to speculation, this person is extremely likely to be a heaven-rank Great Talisman Master. Arbor uttered an "oh" and didn't say anything else. The Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's lips twitched as he smiled. He walked up to the little stoic and said, "Jojo, I've said so much to you, but you're only going to reply with one word? It's already good enough that you have an O." Emolien rolled his eyes and pulled his rash wife to his side. Jojo usually doesn't bother with people when it comes to topics that don't interest him. Xiaomu silently glanced at her husband before pulling back her chubby hand. "You're spouting nonsense." How could she ignore him? Usually, no matter what others said to her, she would definitely respond. After dealing with Chu Qingfei, Arbor took out the real teleportation array from his sleeve and opened it. Just now, they had all disappeared for a moment because Arbor had activated the invisibility glyph array. At the same time, he had used the power of space in his body to teleport everyone a certain distance away. He had completely fooled Master Chu, causing him to muster up the courage to walk out. As a result, he was caught red-handed by Arbor's men. Jojo wasn't someone who liked to be tricked, but she often tricked others if the little stoic truly wanted to scam someone. Based on her methods and character since she was a child, she could basically scam someone successfully. Whoosh! The group of people immediately disappeared from Wang Zhuangzhen's trapping array. At the same time, all the residents of Wang Zhuang Town were taken away. When he appeared again, everyone could not help but let out a long sigh of relief. Thank goodness, they didn't fall into a ditch or crash into a wall this time. They appeared very normally 500 meters away from Dragonflame City's E-City Gate. Just from the city gate, everything looked very normal. People shuttled in and out of the city gate normally, and lined up in an extremely orderly manner. Arbor and Mo Yin looked at each other. Should we directly enter the palace? This place looked normal. Could it be that the inner court of the palace was already under someone's control? Chapter 5060. Emolian was the best at reading little girls' thoughts. Ever since she was young, he could immediately understand the little fellow's small gaze. When he saw her current expression, he couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. Don't underestimate Royal Father. He wasn't the old great king of the Mo kingdom. So how could his father be so easily controlled? Even if he had already allocated all of the U court guards for him to use, Emolian didn't believe that his old father didn't have anyone he could use by his side. Furthermore, his father's strength wasn't something that his deceitful adoptive father could compare to. Even if the kingdom of Daluo had already secretly snuck into the palace, it was impossible for them to control everyone at the first moment. Don't dream of 1,000 years. We'll enter the city normally and observe the situation from the outside. Emolian curled his lips and couldn't help but sneer. If the city is filled with the kingdom of Daluo's people, then they will naturally find an opportunity to send a message to the palace. If they can't control the palace immediately, then they won't have that opportunity in the future. Most importantly, we have to carefully inspect the city to see if someone has set up a talisman matrix. Arbor quickly nodded when he heard this. Jojo's Lotus was still the most considerate. There were many commoners in the city, so they shouldn't be harmed by the kingdom of Daluo's talisman matrices. Since they planned to enter the city normally, everyone followed the cue. Soon, Arbor noticed that the gazes of the people around them were a bit strange, especially the two women in front of them. They turned their heads several times and continuously sized her and Emolian up. At first, the little stoic didn't understand what was going on, but when she saw those women turn their heads several times to look at them, she suddenly had an epiphany. She lowered her head in a flash of inspiration and saw her husband holding her little chubby hand in a grand manner. The little crown princess expressionlessly pulled her hand away. Her current appearance especially resembled a rich woman who kept a gigolo. She wore a blue satin-lined jacket and a silver hairpin in her hair. But that didn't seem right. In order to match her status as a commoner in Wangzhuang town, she had disguised herself as a commoner when she mixed in with the crowd. Emolian, who was beside her, was dressed in a white robe and looked like an elegant young master. At a glance, one could tell that he was from a noble family. Was she a poor woman keeping a rich man as her mistress? Crash! This image was really enough. Arbor couldn't help but curse in his heart. If he had known that he wouldn't be able to recover, he wouldn't have used the transformation talisman. What are you looking at? Yuan Shichan snapped at the two women who were staring at them. Were they crazy? Why did they keep turning their heads to look at them instead of queuing properly? The two women muttered a few words and gave Arbor a strange look before turning their heads back. The little stoic was displeased on the inside. She lowered her head to look at her bucket-like waist and her thick and small arms and legs before her rumphing indignantly. It's fine. Husband likes it, Emolian said with a grin. Who cares what other people think? Let's go our own way. The venerable peach blossom immortal rolled his eyes and couldn't help but curse in his heart. I beg you, stop trying to curry favor in front of Jojo all the time. You're simply too shameless. It was especially irritating to see heaven and earth grabbing the opportunity to feed other people dog food. The group successfully entered the Eastern City Gate. Less than a second after stepping into Eastern Street, the little stoic's expression couldn't help but change slightly. How is it? Emolian asked softly. There's an unusual smell wafting through the air. Chapter 5061. Emolian was startled and hurriedly asked, could it be that the people of Daluo have already poisoned the city after they sneaked into the city? It smells like special pollen. Arbor looked up at the gray sky and narrowed his eyes slightly. Emolian used a message talisman to summon someone, but after a few seconds, a black-clothed youth appeared in front of them and bowed in a low-key manner. Go and quietly bring the general guarding the East City Gate here. I have something to ask him. Yes. Jojo, there's a small tea house nearby. Let's go up and wait. Everyone quietly went to the tea house. After a while, a personal hidden guard brought a middle-aged general upstairs. The man was sweating profusely and had a nervous expression on his face. When he saw Lien, he hurriedly went up to greet her. In the past 2 days, did you discover anything unusual in the city? The middle-aged general in the East City shook his head, but then he seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly added, "Before dawn today, a big blackbird appeared in the sky above the city, but it quickly flew away. At that time, we sent a master archer to shoot it from a distance, but unfortunately, the distance was too far and he couldn't hit it. That blackbird flew too high, piercing through the clouds. Those who weren't of high cultivation couldn't shoot it at all. That master archer only shot its tail feathers and shot down 2 black feathers. Other than that, there was nothing unusual." Prince Imo and Arbor looked solemnly at each other. "It doesn't seem like Tianyun's style," Arbor said with a frown. "The previous few times Tianyun attacked, it was always remote villages or places where no one lived at all. His biggest operation was to attack Sangzhou's Yin City. But in the end, it also ended in failure." Arbor continued his analysis. "Although their current frequency of action has increased a lot, it's not to the extent of directly attacking Divine Prefecture's imperial capital. Qin Xian and the others aren't that stupid, are they? How could they rashly attack Dragon Flame City before they're fully prepared?" Lien nodded. "I also feel that this is a bit strange. It's very different from Tianyun's usual practice. The reason why Tianyun took down Joe City Fortress before was because that place was originally ungoverned. After that, it's easy to understand why he attacked Wangchuan. The River of Forgetfulness is vast and rich in resources. If we can take over the entire River of Forgetfulness and use it as a base, it will provide them with many convenient resources for their subsequent operations." Arbor and Lien looked at each other again. "This matter is not led by the Heavenly Fate Emperor. Tianyun is actually cooperating with a small country like Duoluo. What are they after, unless they can get a lot of benefits from the kingdom of Daluo? What kind of benefits could make Tianyun willing to do this favor and accept such an unreliable task? Your Mo clan has a long-standing grudge with that whatever Duoluo kingdom?" Xiao Mu asked curiously. Lien shook her head. "What grudge could there be? I've never heard of such a small grassland country before. If they hadn't come up with Lily Er's plan and jumped up and down in front of the Crown Prince wouldn't even know what they were. Is that so?" Arbor glanced at the Crown Prince in confusion. "But I keep feeling that Duoluo seems to be targeting your Mo clan. Although that Lily plan is quite annoying to me, it seems that the target of the plan should be you." Chapter 5062. They want to take me away from you and use this to threaten you. They must be plotting something from you. Based on how much Jojo's Lien cared about Jojo, these people must be plotting a gargantuan benefit. When Lien heard the words Lily Er's plan, his entire face darkened. "They will all die," he said coldly. The people he sent out were already searching everywhere for those Lily heirs. As long as this plan dared to continue, he dared to kill everyone he saw until all these fakes were destroyed. Arbor sighed and said dryly, "They are all so pitiful women." "Jojo." Lien glanced at her with displeasure. Fine. Arbor nodded repeatedly and said, "I know that most of them probably brought this upon themselves. I don't pity them." She only felt that it was a pity. Why did they indulge in such wild fantasies and want to become someone else? Wasn't it good to live their own lives? Before the plan was carried out, those Lily heirs already knew what kind of life they were about to face in the future. They willingly became this fake and wanted to replace Arbor. Their thinking was extremely naive and laughable. Furthermore, don't you think it's funny? Who did those Lily heirs meet? Arbor shook her head exasperatedly. They met that bipolar fellow Ming Yasi, found Duan Yu, and even met Lien. What kind of freaking excellent luck was this? Jojo. Lien helplessly squeezed his wifey's hand. Let's not stray from the topic. Oh, Arbor nodded. Since the nightcaw bird appeared in the Eastern District, then the pollen smell I smelled in the city must have been spread by it. Now that we're in such a hurry, I also don't know what the night-caw bird spilled this time. Arbor clenched her small fists and lightly slapped the table. How about this? I'll first prescribe a few more types of antidote. Forget it, I'll spray it with all kinds of antidotes first. All right. However, this city still needs to be under martial law for the next few days. Have the people from the patrol camp in the city strengthen their patrols. If they discover a sick person, they must immediately report it. All right. Mo Lien nodded again and turned to look at the middle-aged general who was sweating profusely. That general had already understood the young crown prince consort's intentions. Did the crown prince consort mean that the large black bird that appeared before dawn this morning was sent by the heavenly fate palace to scatter the medicinal powder? Go back. Be more vigilant these few days. 4 hours later, Arbor and Mo Lien used the transmission talisman formation multiple times and wandered around the entire inner city of Dragonflame City. Fortunately, they were teleported out of the city twice, so they had no choice but to secretly turn back. Fortunately, after going back and forth, Arbor didn't find any traces of the people of Daluo setting up array glyphs. Instead, he studied the original Great City Protection Array of Dragonflame City from inside out. The original defender array of Dragonflame City was completed hundreds of years ago. Mo Lien said softly. Every year, Father would send a special team of talisman masters to carry out talisman power transmission and maintenance. Although it has never been activated, the array glyphs are still intact. At this point, he lowered his head and glanced at his wifey. Jojo, isn't that right? On the way here, Arbor had studied the defender array of Dragonflame City. It was indeed an extremely expensive defensive array from 100 years ago. Chapter 5063. The array disc was set up in the southwest of the palace, and the talisman power inside was also very abundant. The person who set up the array must be a heaven-level talisman master, and it might be more than one person. Dragonflame City was huge. Without 3 heaven-level talisman masters, it would be impossible to set up such a large array in a month. Very good. Arbor nodded. There was really no need to worry about Dragonflame City. Once the defender array was activated, even if 100,000 soldiers attacked the city from the outside, they would not be able to break it without 3 months. Arbor looked up at her husband. It's a very powerful, multi-layer defensive array. There's really no need to worry. Mo Lien grinned and took his wife's hand. Since there's no big problem in the city, let's go back to the palace. The two had just returned to the tea house at the east gate when they saw a horse galloping toward them. At the entrance of the tea house, the person on the horse hurriedly dismounted, rushed forward, and bowed. Xiao Chu greets your highness. Mo Lien raised her eyebrows slightly and thought, my old father is really well informed. He got the news so quickly and knew that I was back. Xiao Chu was the chief palace made by his side. She had been dutiful all these years. Before his mother woke up, she had been in charge of the affairs of the palace. Everyone thought that this chief palace maid would one day turn the tables and be conferred the title of consort by the emperor, but reality proved that she did not. His Majesty saw a golden dragon flying dozens of times above the imperial city and knew that your highness had returned. Your highness must have had a hard time going to the river of forgetfulness. His Majesty said that your highness should quickly enter the palace. Mo Lien knew that after letting Little Seven circle in the air dozens of times and sprinkle a dozen kinds of antidote powder, she knew that her whereabouts could not be hidden from some people's eyes. It seemed that nothing important had happened in the palace, so why did the Grand State Preceptor of Daluo send people to block them at Wangzhuangzhen? Arbor also did not understand and looked at her husband with a puzzled expression. Only now did Xiao Chu see that her crown prince was holding the hand of a small woman with short arms and legs. Whether it was their height, figure, or looks, the two of them were worlds apart. It was too eye-catching. Xiao Chu looked at Arbor with a strange expression, then looked at His Highness the Crown Prince. Before she could speak, Mo Lien calmly put his arm around his wife's waist and whispered, Jojo, let's go to Imperial Father's place. Arbor was absolutely unwilling to enter the palace at this time. If Emollien's father saw his comical appearance, that guy might laugh for a year. No way. Arbor quickly waved his hand. Since there's nothing else with your father, I'll return to the Eastern Palace first. Emollien was secretly amused, seeing that his wife was adamant about not going with him to see his old father. He could only nod helplessly. All right then. Jojo, go home first. I'll be back later. The outstanding talent glanced at Xiao Mu again with a strange expression. Jojo? Wasn't the crown princess called Jojo? She often heard the crown prince call her that. But the crown princess, she still not leaving? Emollien's indifferent gaze swept over Xiao Chu, causing the latter to quickly look away. Could it be that the crown princess went to Wang Chuan and was secretly attacked by enemies? Was she framed and her image changed? She had also heard that the two of them seemed to have encountered many things in Wang Chuan. A while ago, the emperor had even anxiously sent shadow guards to Wang Chuan to find the couple. Chapter 5064. Given His Highness the Crown Prince's love and care for the little Crown Princess, he would not tolerate even a grain of sand in his eyes. He would never allow anyone to disrespect the little Crown Princess in any way, not even a harsh word. Therefore, her impudent and bold gaze must have angered His Highness the Crown Prince. Thinking of this, Xiao Chu couldn't help but feel a little shocked. She hurriedly restrained her expression and bowed respectfully to Arbor. Xiao Chu's eyes were poor. I didn't know that the Crown Princess was here. She quickly swept a glance at Arbor and hurriedly lowered her head. Arbor was very sharp and immediately caught the hint of surprise in this head palace maid's eyes. Yes, her current image was very bad, so it was natural for her to be surprised. However, Xiao Chu's surprise felt very strange. It seemed that her surprised gaze also contained some sympathy and pity. What the hell? Did she think that Sir Jojo's current image was permanent? I'll be able to recover in 4 hours, all right. Sir Jojo, who had been pitied for no reason, was not in a good mood. Jojo, Emollien smiled and patted her head. Your husband will be back in 2 hours. Let's have dinner together. Arbor nodded and looked at his back as he rode away. Her brows furrowed slightly. Xiao Mu felt a bit strange, and her heart was a bit unsettled. Hence, she attributed this strange feeling to an omen. Her experience growing up told her that her intuition was very sharp. Little butterflies follow His Highness into the palace to take a look. Arbor flicked her fingers. 2 black poison-tailed butterflies flapped their wings and quickly chased after Emollien. Is there something wrong with that woman? The venerable peach blossom immortal walked to Arbor's side and asked in a low voice. Her eyes are clear and her complexion normal. She wasn't drugged or controlled. She wasn't under any puppet spell. Arbor shook her head. However, her intuition had always been accurate. She had a feeling that a storm was coming. As if something was about to happen, Arbor returned to the Eastern Palace. He first returned to the Star Domain to wash up and wash off the dust on his body. When he came out, he had just sat down at the table and asked Kai Shio to bring him a cup of tea when he received an urgent message from Emollien. Jojo, quickly come to Imperial Mother's morning sunlight palace. Xiao Mu abruptly jumped up from her stool and knocked over the tea beside her. There was an inexplicable sense of panic in her heart that she could not suppress. He hurriedly took a robe, put it on, and ran out of the room. Then, he saw a black shadow suddenly appear beside him and hurriedly cupped his fists. Crown Princess, His Highness has ordered this subordinate to bring the Crown Princess to Morning Sunlight Palace. What happened? Arbor pursed his lips and asked sternly. His Highness the Crown Prince finished talking with His Majesty and went to the Empress. The Empress said that she had invited your mother, the Crown Princess, to the palace for tonight's banquet and asked His Highness to stay for dinner. Who knows, when your mother entered the palace, she brought you along to pay respects to the Empress. What do you mean? Sir Jojo's heart could not help but fiercely shrink. The secret guard hurriedly said, It's what you think, Crown Princess. Your mother brought a fake into the palace. Xiaomu only felt like the world was spinning. No wonder she felt that something was off everywhere. With the country of Daluo's weak power, it was impossible for them to make a move against the imperial palace. They found her mother. Chapter 5065. No wonder her heart was palpitating earlier, feeling that something was about to happen. So, it was because the people of the country of Duoluo had reached into her home first. Although the Qiao estate didn't have any guards on the surface, there were hidden guards in the dark, so this point was quite strange. How did that fake enter the door without alerting the hidden guards and deceive her mother? Although her mother's cultivation wasn't high, her daughter's personality had long been imprinted in her bones and blood after interacting with her for so many years. Arbor believed that her mother definitely wouldn't mistake her for someone else. Therefore, there was a high chance that this matter was even the hidden guards of the Qiao estate had probably fallen into some kind of trap. The hidden guard saw an extremely bloodthirsty and sinister smile on the little crown princess's face. Like a devil returning from hell, that pair of deformed little eyes emitted a sinister light and emitted endless ghost energy. He immediately shuddered and didn't dare to say anything more. He turned around and led the way, rapidly leading the crown princess to the Empress Central Palace Hall. The people of the country of Duoluo had courted disaster this time by messing with the crown princess. There was no doubt that they would be in for a lot of bad luck in the future. The two figures were as fast as lightning, quickly disappearing into the dark night. On the other side of the room, Bai Wuxia discovered that her son's complexion was very bad. His pair of cold phoenix eyes occasionally swept across the crowd, revealing an extremely chilly and austere intent. Ever since Madame Weisher brought her daughter into the palace to meet the Empress, the crown prince's complexion immediately changed. Bai Wuxia felt that things were developing in a strange direction. The news of the crown prince's return to the capital was first informed by His Majesty. At that time, she received news that the crown prince and his entourage had already returned to the capital, but she didn't see the crown princess accompanying them. Now, the crown princess had only returned to her maternal home and entered the palace with her mother. Why did her son's complexion become so strange? Queen Bai secretly glared at her son, then smiled at Wei Ziqin and said, "Madame Wei." Prince Imo suddenly stood up and bowed to his mother. "Mother, your son will go pick up his wife." Queen Bai looked confused. She looked back at Wei Ziqin, who was smiling. She looked at the little girl next to her. What kind of person was the Empress? If she still couldn't sense that something was amiss, then she would be a real fool. She looked suspiciously at Madame Wei and her daughter before her gaze fell on Wei Ziqin. Their son spoke bluntly to the two people in front of him, and even said that he was going out to pick up his wife. What did he mean by picking up his wife? Did that mean that the little girl who looked like Jojo wasn't his wife? Could it be a fake? The more Bai Wuxia looked at Madame Wei and her daughter, the more uncomfortable he felt. She was now a little confused and kept looking at the door, waiting for her son to come in and explain to her. At first glance, he felt that there was nothing wrong with this facial paralysis in front of him. But for some reason, the more he looked, the more uncomfortable he felt. The eyebrows were very similar, but sitting there, the aura was completely different. "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" Wei Ziqin looked at her in confusion and asked, "Why did His Highness the Crown Prince suddenly get angry?" Today, the Empress had summoned many women. At this moment, everyone looked curiously at Wei Ziqin and her daughter. They were more or less curious. Everyone present more or less knew that the Crown Princess was a troublemaker. Chapter 5066. After experiencing several palace banquets, most of them were very well-behaved now. They didn't dare to treat the little crown princess as an ordinary person. Think about it. When did something good happen when the little crown princess was invited to a banquet? Everyone who dared to provoke the crown princess at a palace banquet definitely didn't have a good ending. From a small matter like Madame Gua to a big matter like the City of Shadows at the most recent palace banquet, the little crown princess slapped the face of a single alchemist. She drew a sage-grade golden talisman and even summoned a frightening, ferocious beast. At that time, Everyone present was dumbfounded. They couldn't think about it. If they thought too much about it, it would only make them cry. So today, when this group of noble ladies and madams saw Wei Ziqin and her daughter arrive, they all went up to greet them in a very friendly manner. All of them revealed quail-like smiles. If they couldn't offend them, then they should hide and go along with them. But they felt that things were developing in a strange direction again. His Highness the Crown Prince, who had always doted on the Crown Princess endlessly, actually gave the Crown Princess and her mother, Madame Wei, a cold shoulder in front of everyone today. Was the wind going to change direction again? It was said that His Highness the Crown Prince encountered a great danger during his trip to the River of Forgetfulness. When he entered the city this time, the Crown Princess wasn't by his side at all. Could it be that His Highness the Crown Prince finally couldn't stand that fierce girl and completely fell out with the Crown Princess? Prince Imo quickly walked out of the palace hall and coincidentally bumped into the outstanding talent, leading a group of people in his direction. The outstanding talent hurriedly led the group of palace maids to greet him as soon as they met. "Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince," the outstanding talent said respectfully. "This servant is under His Majesty's orders to bring some special tribute fruits to Your Highness and the madams." The Crown Prince swept a glance and saw many fist-sized, translucent, and pink fruits on the fruit platter. He didn't pay much attention to it and only nodded slightly before walking over. Just as he reached the long steps in front of the palace hall, he saw a round little figure flying over as fast as lightning. He jumped in front of him in an instant. Emolian hurriedly reached out to hug her and lifted her sleeve to wipe the sweat off her forehead. "Why'd you run so fast?" "Don't worry, those two people won't be able to escape." "Where are they?" Mr. Jojo roared angrily. Emolian hugged her and swayed, crying out pitifully, "Jojo, your husband was molested." "Who?" Arbor's eyes flashed with killing intent. "It's that fake. She kept throwing flirtatious glances at me as soon as she arrived. At first, I thought her eyes were cramping." Arbor moved his limbs and shouted, "I'm going to kill her. Let's ask him first." Emolian hurriedly pressed down on his wife's body and smiled. "Let's get to the bottom of this first. I've already sent someone to the Chow residence to check on the situation. We'll receive a reply soon." The outstanding talent walked a few steps and turned back to glare at a palace maid who had stopped in her tracks. "Don't look around. Don't you know the rules?" That palace maid hurriedly retracted her gaze and asked the outstanding talent with a strange expression, "Aunt, who is that plump woman? How could she be so intimate with the Crown Prince?" It was simply inconceivable. The outstanding talent coldly swept her a glance. "Do your own thing. Don't ask about things that you shouldn't meddle in." That palace maid followed behind the group and couldn't help but twitch her mouth. Unwilling to give up, she turned back to look at the plump woman with a bucket-like waist. It seemed that His Highness the Crown Prince's judgment of people wasn't very good. He previously doted on that extremely bad-tempered Crown Princess so much. Chapter 50-67. But no matter what, even though the Crown Princess had a bad temper, she was still good-looking. But this plump woman with a bucket-like waist, no matter how one looked at her, she looked disgusting, right? Why was His Highness's eyesight getting worse and worse? The little royal maid stumbled slightly and hurriedly lowered her head to look at the road, quickly catching up with the group of outstanding talents in front of her. "Jojo, don't get angry first. Let's understand the situation first." After all, they had been away from Forget River for so long, so they really didn't know what had happened at home. If by any chance Qiao Zhongbong, Wei Ziqin, and Second Uncle's family had all fallen into someone else's hands now, then when they did things, they would definitely be restrained and restrained. "That mother of yours is also a fake." Emolian lowered her head and whispered in Arbor's ear. When they met just now, the fake Wei Ziqin gave him a very fake smile and even called him Your Highness the Crown Prince with some respect in her expression. How could this be Jojo's mother herself? Jojo's parents and Second Uncle's family all called him Little M.O. when they saw him. How could they call him Your Highness the Crown Prince? Your Highness the Crown Prince was what outsiders called him. How could his own people call him that? I'm worried about them. Arbor's expression was very ugly, especially since Xiao Yao should be about to give birth soon. She didn't know how her family was doing now. Emolian gripped his wife's small hand tightly and deliberately said in a relaxed tone, "When we were on Seacone Planet, we had seen all kinds of storms. We could even resist the siege of the Sure family of China. I believe that our family will definitely be fine." Arbor nodded and quickened her pace, walking hand in hand with Emolian into the main hall. Along the way, Arbor was already used to those strange gazes. It was similar to how those Annies and big sisters at the city gate looked at her. It was just that the madams and misses present here had much more noble statuses. Arbor was already very calm. In any case, her husband didn't mind, so why should she care about the gazes of others? Even if she was 70 or 80 years old and hunched over, Jojo's lotus was still Jojo's. Bai Wuxiao looked up and saw the couple holding hands. He quickly stood up and asked, "Tang Yuan's wife, what's wrong? How could it be that he take some medicine that he shouldn't have? He was still poisoned. What's going on? You're even shorter than the last time I saw you." Arbor looked at Queen Bai, speechless. Emolian couldn't help but twitch her lips. "Mother, can you not mention the word short?" The Empress's reaction could be said to be extremely fast. A strong desire to survive arose spontaneously. No matter what had happened before, she still couldn't figure it out. At this moment, whenever they saw their son holding the hand of a lady or woman, they would recognize her as Tang Yuan's wife. Even if their daughter-in-law's appearance had changed drastically, their son would not mistake her for his wife. As a mother, how could she not know that her son's taste was unique? Wei Ziqin stood up with a slightly unpleasant expression. She coldly glanced at Arbor, who was next to the crown prince. "What is the meaning of this, Your Highness?" The women in the hall were a little confused. Their gazes all fell on Arbor's face. They couldn't help but think to themselves, "I can't bear to see this. The crown prince is as handsome as a god, but now he's holding the hand of a short woman. The funniest one is the Empress." Chapter 5068. The little stoic crown princess was clearly sitting next to Madame Nei Wei, but Her Majesty the Empress actually called that woman with a bucket-like waist her daughter-in-law. What kind of stupid thing was this? The noble ladies and madams in the hall coughed lightly and looked over in confusion. At this moment, Arbor and Emolian strode into the main hall at the same time, and their gazes immediately locked onto the mother and daughter pair. They had Wei Ziqin's face and figure, but Arbor didn't need to look to immediately sense that this woman impersonating Wei Ziqin didn't resemble her mother in any way. In Emolian's eyes, the stoic-faced young lady sitting next to Madame Nei Wei was simply trying to draw a tiger, but ended up looking like a dog instead. It was simply too laughable. Jojo's adorably stoic face had been carved into the depths of his blood and bones since he was young, leaving an incomparably deep impression. Just based on this woman in front of him, she could pretend to be stoic just by putting on a stoic face. She was more like an idiot. She looked like an idiot and didn't seem to be quick-witted at all. His emotions were ignited at the slightest spark, and he was on the verge of exploding. Arbor suddenly felt Emolian's finger pressing down lightly on his palm. She forcibly suppressed the fury that was about to erupt and slowly suppressed it. Since this mother and daughter pair dared to enter the palace so openly, they must have something to rely on. Otherwise, why would they dare to step into the palace's inner court and walk right into a trap? Therefore, Mother Endem Arbor's heart tightened slightly. "You're the perfect creation, Lily in number 0, right?" This was Arbor's first time seeing someone who looked infinitely similar to her up close. If one only looked at their appearances, they really were very similar. Their appearances were almost 70% similar, and absolutely no one would be able to distinguish the two from more than 10 meters away. If this impersonator was placed together with the original little crown princess, they were completely like a pair of twin sisters. This was the real mature creation of the state preceptor. The ones he had encountered before were probably just immature imitations. Arbor's gaze fell on the woman's face. It was hard to imagine that there would actually be such a group of people in this world. They were unwilling to face their own lives and rack their brains just to imitate others. What was the meaning of a life that was replicated like this? The stoic-faced young lady beside Madame Wei hastily stood up uneasily and looked at Arbor in confusion. "Who are you?" Everyone knows that the Crown Princess is a great talisman master. She is best at drawing talismans in the air. "Give me one." Arbor looked at her indifferently and got straight to the point. Everyone had a baffled look on their faces. There were even a few nervous women who hurriedly got up and quickly called the servant girls and manservants beside them to move their tables and chairs to the back. What kind of joke was this? The Crown Princess was about to draw talismans in the air and summon that ferocious beast whose face couldn't be seen clearly. According to their past experience, this person who dared to provoke the Crown Princess must be tired of living. For safety's sake, the madams decided that it was better to stay away from this little Crown Princess who could explode at any time. This impersonator actually didn't panic and stood up naturally and gracefully. She bowed at Empress before turning to Arbor with cupped fists and a smile. Only then did she say gently, "What's so difficult about drawing talismans in the air?" "It's just that, madam, in what capacity are you asking me to draw talismans in the air?" Chapter 5069. As soon as the fake finished speaking, Arbor didn't say anything else. He raised his hand and swiped at the air in front of him, creating ripples. He drew and revealed talisman in a few minutes and quickly threw it over. What was strange was that just as Arbor made this move, the fake opposite him also moved her hand very quickly. She copied him and drew a few lines in the air as if she had learned it on the spot. Her movements were actually quite accurate. The fake also moved her finger and quickly drew a talisman in the air, which collided head-on with the revealed talisman that Arbor had flown over. Everyone saw the two void talismans collide in the air, creating a beautiful stream of light. The power of the talisman splashed everywhere and dissipated with a few whooshing sounds. The group of officials, madams, noble ladies, and laymen could only watch the commotion. They only saw the brilliant light in front of them and really couldn't see what was going on. However, they could clearly see that the little woman with a water bucket waist standing next to the Crown Prince didn't have any change in expression when she shot out a void talisman. However, the Crown Princess on the other side swayed a few times. It can't be who would believe that such a fierce person like the Crown Princess would actually be defeated in one move. Everyone glanced at the little pudgy Xiao Mu in bewilderment before looking at the slightly pale fake. They heard the slightly older madam of Censor Jiang murmur in a low voice, "What we see may not be real. Could it be that the Crown Princess we see is actually an imposter? And the one that His Highness the Crown Prince led through the door is actually the real Crown Princess?" As soon as she said this, everyone seemed to have been enlightened and instantly sobered up a bit. A madam on the side quickly nodded and said, "No wonder that water bucket cough, young madam." When she said this, she couldn't help but feel awkward. How should she address the woman with a water bucket waist at the door? She definitely didn't look young. Calling her young madam didn't seem appropriate. Calling her the Crown Princess, looking at that pair of mung bean eyes and that ordinary ugly face, she really couldn't bring herself to call her that. What kind of strange trick was this little Crown Princess up to? Why did she suddenly change her face and have to torment herself to look like a middle-aged woman? From the looks of it, His Highness the Crown Prince truly loved his wife. This little Crown Princess had already tormented herself into such an ugly state, but His Highness was still able to turn a blind eye to it. How great must he be to be able to do this? On Arbor's side, his eyes were slightly bright as he stared at the fake in front of him. There was a completely incomprehensible luster in his eyes. "Your imitation is not bad." Arbor took 2 steps forward and suddenly became interested. "Let me see the effect of your imitation talisman." As soon as she finished speaking, she moved like a bolt of lightning. Her fingers formed seals as she ceaselessly stirred the air in front of her, and she ceaselessly changed various hand signs and movements. Everyone only felt their vision blur as they saw the air fluctuate. Talismans glowing with purple light were drawn by the young woman with a water bucket waist in the air. Row after row, the list went on so quickly that it made everyone's breathing stop. The head of the fake opposite him was dripping with sweat. At first, he could keep up with the speed of Arbor's talismans, but after a few minutes, even a layman could see that something was wrong. Something was too wrong. That fake crown princess's hand signs are the same as the other person's, except for the first time when a talisman flew out and knocked away the water bucket waste woman's void talisman attack. Chapter 5070. After that, there were no more flashes of talisman light. On the other hand, the barrel-waisted woman was like a demon. Talisman after talisman appeared in the air. She continuously drew 99 void talismans. 3 in a row, 33 in a row. From top to bottom, it formed a purple talisman wall in front of everyone. Who could keep up with the speed of talisman drawing? Even if they used imitation talismans, they could not keep up with Arbor's movements and speed. Even though everyone had seen many talisman masters before, this was the first time they had seen such a scene. They were so shocked that their jaws dropped. At this moment, everyone saw the barrel-waisted woman facing the fake crown princess and coldly curl her lips. After this action, her chubby face began to change little by little. Her facial features were rapidly recovering, slowly recovering to their original appearance. This scene was indeed magical enough. The transformation talisman's effect disappeared at this moment, and the young crown prince consort regained her original appearance. The illusory excess fat on her stomach also disappeared. What replaced it was the thin figure of the crown princess under a wide satin jacket. Her eyes were cold. It was the same rustic jacket and the same simple silver hairpin. However, at this moment, the little crown princess was shockingly beautiful in everyone's eyes. Other people's beauty faded with the passage of time. The little crown princess seemed to be different. The little crown princess became more beautiful with the passage of time. Seeing her today, they felt that compared to the past, she seemed to have a faint charm. There was an indescribable feeling between her eyebrows. Queen Bee slapped her thigh and happily stood up. "Sweetheart, you finally changed back? Quick, quick, come a mother. Let mother take a good look at you. Daughter-in-law, I haven't seen you for a long time. Why do I feel that you've gained weight?" The crown prince could not help but roll his eyes. What was wrong with his mother? She said that his wife was short and fat. If you don't know how to speak, then don't say it. The little crown princess subconsciously touched her lower abdomen and nodded as she admitted, "I'm a little plump." It was time for her to gain some weight. She should take care of her small body and let baby Mo grow up well. As an experienced person, Empress Bai's eyes immediately lit up when she saw her daughter-in-law's little action. At this moment, she couldn't care less about being an empress. She walked over to the two of them and asked, "Little glutinous dumpling, is your wife mother?" Prince Mo rolled his eyes at her in dissatisfaction. Is this the time to talk about these things? How could it not be the right time? His daughter-in-law was pregnant, which was a big deal. It was much more important than those messy things. All right. Mother will let you settle the matter first." The White Queen curled her lips and stopped. She looked at the 33 rows of talisman walls in front of her daughter-in-law, and her eyes lit up. "Tang Yuan's wife, what talisman formation is this?" 9-9-1 attack talisman formation, Arbor said expressionlessly. "I created it myself." The White Queen immediately revealed her true thoughts and nodded with praise. "As expected of my daughter-in-law, you have no problem creating your own talisman formation. Quick, let mother open her eyes and see how effective this attack talisman formation is." Mother. Emolian secretly gave her a look. The White Queen immediately understood. She raised her hand and opened it slightly. A transparent and flawless defensive wall immediately appeared between her hands. Chapter 5071. The barrier abruptly landed beside the young crown prince consort and the fake. At the same time, the crown prince waved his hand to form 2 defensive walls around them, following which the 99 talismans that were drawn in the void started to spin like butterflies. The talisman spun, leaving after images in front of everyone. In the blink of an eye, They had surrounded the screaming fake crown princess. The hearts of the many noble ladies and madams of the officials all skipped a beat. They hurriedly stepped back, hoping to get as far away as possible. Fortunately, all the commotion happened within the defensive barrier that the White Queen and Prince Mo had set up together. It did not affect other places. The 99 offensive talismans spun into a cocoon shape, wrapping around the fake crown princess. Suddenly, in a strange way, the 99 talismans combined into a huge talisman that was more than 20 times larger than a normal talisman. It emitted a holy golden light. While everyone was gaping in shock, it charged toward the fake crown princess with the force of a thunderbolt. That unlucky fake was instantly bound by the golden light and pressed to the ground by that super large talisman. Instantly, he spat out a mouthful of blood. What's the use of an imitation talisman? It's similar in appearance, but not in spirit. Arbor shook his head helplessly. He waved his hand and said, "Explode." The huge golden talisman wrapped tightly around the fake. At this moment, a strange light burst out. All the offensive talisman power turned into thousands of streams of light, piercing through the fake crown princess body without any hindrance. Everyone stared blankly at him. They felt that in an instant, the unlucky one had been turned into a sieve by the thousands of streams of light. Small holes appeared all over her body from top to bottom. They were all holes caused by the thousands of streams of light. They were densely arranged on her body, arms, face, and neck. After she stood up with difficulty, she raised her head. She looked very strange. It was as if she was a fountain that had been poked with thousands of needles and was leaking from head to toe. There wasn't a single spot on his body that wasn't bleeding. Bright red beads of blood were constantly pouring out from the tiny holes on his body. The unlucky fake could only watch as his blood flowed out of his body. His entire face was no longer calm and expressionless. It was completely twisted beyond recognition. He could feel his life force slipping away, and his life was about to come to an end. You tried to paint a tiger, but ended up looking like a dog. Mo Yin angrily rebuked. She raised her sleeve and slapped the fake heavily across the air. Scram! Just looking at it was disgusting. She actually dared to impersonate his Charles and openly enter the palace to annoy him. She was simply courting death. Boom! The fake crown prince consort fell straight to the ground, sprawled out on all fours as her limbs drooped down weakly. Bai Wuxia called out helplessly, "Quick, someone come and carry her out. Don't dirty this consort's newly laid carpet." So hateful. The empress walked over to her son and daughter-in-law and said with a smile, "Quick, come and tell mother about the important matters. Tang Yuan's wife, are you report?" At this moment, a secret guard from the palace rushed over. He knelt on one knee and said, "Reporting to the Empress, Grand Concubine Fang's carriage has been surrounded by a large group of strange-faced harpies at the east gate." The Empress' eyes narrowed dangerously. The Grand Concubine had indeed gone to Longting Temple to burn incense today. It was about time for her to return to the palace. She finally couldn't hold back anymore. Chapter 5072, 5082 Addendum. So that's what it was all about. Realization dawned on Queen Bai's face. She glanced at the impostor on the ground, and understanding flitted through her eyes. "Your Majesty, Madame Wei is missing," a female official beside the Empress reminded her in a small voice. Queen Bai glanced and saw that Madame Wei was nowhere to be seen. She quickly looked at her son and daughter-in-law and grumbled. Madame Wei escaped. She got off too easy. Earlier, everyone's eyes were focused on the 99 void purple talismans that flew out of Arbor. They were so shocked that they couldn't recover their wits for a while. Thus, Madame Wei took advantage of this gap and quietly slipped out of the door. No one saw her. Arbor snorted disapprovingly. "She can't escape." When Queen Bai heard this, she knew there was hope. She looked at Arbor with a curious expression. "Daughter-in-law, what brilliant plan do you have? Quickly tell mother." Looking at her daughter-in-law's calm and stoic face, the Empress was dying of curiosity. I placed a tracking talisman on her. As long as she doesn't leave Dragonflame City's range, I can receive feedback on her location at any time, the little stoic whispered to the Empress. Other than that, I also sent out tracking poison-tailed butterflies to follow her. She hasn't gone far. She's circling around the chrysanthemum garden outside your hall. Is that so? Then let's hurry over and catch her, Queen Bee said in a low voice. We can't let her escape like this. Since she dares to enter the palace so openly, she must have a plan and must have something to rely on. We can't lower our guard. There's no rush. Arbor tugged on the Empress' sleeve. I placed a talisman array there. She won't be able to leave anytime soon. Queen Bee quickly asked, Daughter-in-law, when did you place a talisman array in the chrysanthemum garden? When I came, I placed a talisman array everywhere I passed. As long as I use my divine consciousness, the talisman array will activate. Queen Bee looked astonished. She glanced at her daughter-in-law and murmured, Can Mother ask how many talisman arrays you placed? Arbor blinked and tilted his head. I didn't count, but there are more than 20 rune arrays. White Queen was speechless. They're all trapping arrays? All of them. Trapping array, bewildering array, killing array, gravity array. White Queen was speechless. She suddenly didn't feel like talking to her daughter-in-law. The Empress, who originally thought that her talent was not bad, felt that life was really there was no harm if there was no comparison. Once there was a comparison, she immediately felt tens of thousands of points of damage. It was simply too speechless. This little guy was actually able to set up dozens of talisman arrays that were not the same as he was on his way here. This was too inconceivable. Prince Imo, who had been pushed aside by his mother, looked speechlessly at the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law who had been whispering to each other for a long time. He quickly stepped forward and said, Mother, what are you and Jojo talking about? After he finished speaking, he hurriedly left. He had been dominating his son and daughter-in-law for so long. He was simply disrespectful. Son, your wife is really extraordinary. She's far from ordinary. Empress Bee clicked her tongue and said, You've really picked up a treasure. Of course. When Prince Imo heard his mother praise his daughter-in-law, his previous anger was immediately swept away. He put on a smiling face and nodded. Mother, Jojo's talent in drawing talismans is really you don't know if you haven't seen it. It's definitely. If Jojo says he's second, no one in this world would dare to say they're first. Chapter 5073. Yes. The White Queen nodded in agreement and thought to herself, I must go with my son and daughter-in-law later and see the dozen or so different talisman arrays set up by my daughter-in-law to broaden my horizons. The mother and son gathered together to flatter Arbor, but the person in question glanced at them helplessly. Seeing the two talking enthusiastically, Arbor could only speechlessly pull the crown prince's sleeve and point at the fake crown princess who was paralyzed on the ground. Mo Lien glanced over from the corner of his eyes, only to see the fake lying on the ground suddenly move his limbs. Her hands were twisted in a very twisted posture and turned slightly behind her back. Arbor's eyes flickered. He looked carefully and found that the fake's hands and feet were connected to a transparent thread. When the thread moved, the fake immediately got up and crawled a few steps forward in a stiff posture. Two beams of cold light appeared in her eyes as she stared faintly at Arbor in front of her. Arbor was not afraid of her even when she was alive, let alone the puppet in front of him who was controlled by someone else. He glanced at her contemptuously and drew 3 offensive purple talismans in the air with his fingers. Swish, swish, swish. They rushed toward the puppet's head. The fierce attacks landed on the fake's head 3 times in a row. The latter let out an unpleasant roar and crawled on the ground with her sharp nails. Filth dripped from her mouth. Why are you hiding? Since you've come, then quickly show yourself. The White Queen could not help but laugh. She raised her hands, and 2 flying fireballs crashed toward the eaves. Along with a crisp bang sound, fine powder fell from the palace beam. A black figure suddenly landed on the ground. The newcomer bent over and made a defensive posture. Under the mask, a pair of small black eyes flashed with a cunning light. Your talisman skills are not bad. Arbor did not say anything and gave him 9 offensive talismans. The latter's expression immediately changed. He dodged left and right, trying to avoid her attack. However, his body moved and crashed into a defensive wall behind him. Only then did he realize that there were 4 defensive walls around him. No, the moment he appeared, he was trapped in the defensive array glyphs of the little crown princess. This abominable girl's methods were truly impressive. The Grand State Preceptor knew that it would be extremely difficult to impersonate the little crown princess. Therefore, they decided to be prepared and cast a mimic talisman on Lilier Zero. If they met the real crown princess, they could use the mimic talisman to fool others. Moreover, the Grand State Master had clearly told them from the start that they could enter the palace as they wished. The crown princess had already sent people to delay them. But now it was obvious that the plan could not keep up with the changes. Everything had failed because of the little crown princess's return to the palace. Damn it! How did things suddenly develop to this point? The people sent by the state preceptor to stall the crown prince and the crown princess were all useless. So many people couldn't even hold back 2 young people. The puppeteer dodged several attack talismans from Arbor, but when he turned around, he accidentally hit his head on the defensive wall. At that time, he was drunk. He only felt a sizzling electric current on the defensive wall that slid through his body and electrocuted him, throwing him to the ground heavily. The puppeteer cursed in his heart. His eyes were so frightened that they were distorted. He quickly turned to look in the direction of Arbor. Chapter 5074. He saw the little girl looking at him expressionlessly. Her dark eyes were filled with mockery. The pair of eyes that looked at him were completely devoid of emotion. They were like 2 deep pools of water, dead and still. How could there be such cold eyes in this world? The puppet master's entire body trembled, and he felt somewhat unwell. There was no one in this world who could be more deceitful than the little crown princess. This crown princess had built a defensive wall, but she had used some strange method to integrate the power of lightning into the defensive wall. As long as someone crashed into the defensive wall, they would immediately be injured by the power of lightning. Needless to say, the uncomfortable feeling of the lightning corroding the body was especially good. The puppet master had been caught off guard by the electric shock. Until now, his hands and feet were curled up like a shrimp. He was almost unable to speak. The White Queen looked as if she had discovered a new continent. She circled around the transparent defensive wall and exclaimed in amazement, "Daughter-in-law, what method did you use to integrate the power of the 5 spirits into the defensive wall? This method is good. Look, it caught someone off guard. Didn't that unlucky puppet master fall to the ground? Ha ha! In a fight, this method was too easy to be deceitful. It didn't take any effort. As long as the other party crashed into the defensive wall, he would be in big trouble. And the person who set up the defensive wall didn't need to use too much spiritual power. This was a good method to get things done once and for all. How did this little girl think of these strange methods? She was really creative. She dared to try anything. Arbor blinked. This was one of the methods of controlling spiritual power recorded in the Spirit Division record. Arbor felt that it was very useful to integrate the power of the 5 spirits into the defensive wall, defensive shield, and various defensive equipment. Thus, she studied it thoroughly. She realized that this was definitely a necessary skill for deceitful people. She immediately applied what she learned and prepared to learn all the tricks in the Spirit Division record. "Mother, do you want to learn? I can teach you if there's a chance." Okay. Seeing that the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law's heads were about to tilt together again, the crown prince hurriedly stood between the 2 of them and said with a serious face, "Jojo, stop fooling around. Let's quickly figure out the situation at home first." When Xiao Mu heard this, she couldn't be bothered with probing that puppet cultivator anymore and sent her husband a look. Mo Yin raised her hand slightly. Immediately, for black shadows pierced through the air and beat the puppet master to the ground in a few moves. They lifted him up and threw him in front of the crown prince and the young crown princess. Madame Wei wandered around the large chrysanthemum garden for about half an hour. The more she wandered, the more she felt that the scenery before her was very strange. Why was he always walking around in circles in this area? She was shocked and immediately reacted. She might have been plotted against. Just as she was about to stop and think carefully about what to do, a cold wind blew past her. She saw an old man with gray hair and beard appear in front of her with a cold expression. State Preceptor. The fake Madame Wei first let out a small sigh of relief. Then, she was shocked and hurriedly lowered her head in greeting. State Preceptor Larry coldly glanced at the fake Madame Wei. "You're too useless." These two people didn't even last a quarter of an hour in the hall before their true identities were exposed. Truly useless. Chapter 5075. Thinking about how his most perfect creation, Lily and Number Zero, had been ruined in the hands of the other party, he felt extremely uncomfortable. How abominable. Hot Duo, Gu Air, and the woman in front of him were all useless, the best of the worst. Hot Duo was especially disappointing. He brought 5,000 men to guard the outskirts of Dragonflame City. He was guarding against the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess suddenly returning to the capital, who knew that no matter how much he tried, he still couldn't prevent them from returning. He had returned, and he had returned to the imperial capital in secret. When he received the news and realized that something was wrong, it was already too late to inform everyone to retreat. "Follow me." This double trap array couldn't stop Larry. This person shook out a bright yellow lamp from his sleeve. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a trace of a cold smile. No matter how dense the array was, he had a divine artifact and could naturally break through any miasma in front of him. The fake Madame Wei was slightly relieved. She quickly nodded and followed Larry. As she walked, she lowered her head and said, "Lord Grand Tutor, I'm afraid Lily and Number Zero and the Puppet Master are more likely than not. It bodes ill." Fortunately, she reacted quickly and slipped away. Otherwise, she would be one of the people who died in the Emperor's Central Palace. Grand Tutor Larry didn't say a word. He turned around and led her to wander around the chrysanthemum garden, following the floating lamp in front of them. They seemed to walk without any pattern. In less than half an hour, he led the fake Madame Wei out of the chrysanthemum garden. The fake Madame Wei heaved a sigh of relief and bowed. "Thank you, Lord Grand Tutor." Suddenly, State Preceptor Larry reached out and grabbed her by the throat, causing the fake Madame Wei to stare at him in panic. The fake Madame Wei wanted to say something, but she didn't even have the strength to speak. Her eyes were full of fear as she stared at the Lord Grand Tutor, who suddenly changed his expression, and she made sound. With the sound of her neck breaking, the fake Madame Wei's eyes were bloodshot as she widened her eyes in disbelief. Crack! State Preceptor Larry mercilessly crushed the fake Madame Wei's neck and said coldly, "Idiot! Such an idiot should not be alive to waste resources." Just as he was about to leave, he turned around to stare at the fake Madame Wei's wide-eyed face and smiled sinisterly. On the other side, Arbor, who was secretly checking the whereabouts of the fake Madame Wei, suddenly stopped and looked up at Mo Lien with a puzzled expression. "What's wrong, Jojo? We suddenly lost contact." Arbor was suspicious. He tugged at Mo Lien and whispered, "Let's go out and take a look." The tracking talisman on the fake had lost its effect? There could only be two possibilities. The first possibility was that the fake discovered the existence of the tracking talisman and removed it. Secondly, the fake was already dead. Naturally, the tracking talisman lost its effect. I wonder what kind of situation it is. Mo Lien hummed in response and naturally followed his wife out of the Central Palace's main hall. Seeing this, Empress Bai hurriedly raised her feet to catch up with her son and daughter-in-law. She trotted all the way to catch up with them. "Huh?" Arbor couldn't help but let out a puzzled sound. Mo Lien sniffed around and looked around for a while before saying, "Jojo, someone used a divine artifact here." Chapter 5076. Arbor couldn't help but laugh. This fellow's nose was really sharp. She could even sniff out the scent of a divine weapon being used by someone else. Did that fake walk out of your double confinement formation? The White Empress couldn't resist asking. Someone probably barged in and took her out. Arbor carefully sensed and confirmed this point. There were clearly two people's auras flowing in this formation. This meant that the fake was taken away by someone. A faint sneer appeared on Arbor's lips. Excellent. Then she wanted to see how many of her talisman formations this person's divine weapon could break. When she thought of this, a cold glint flitted through her eyes. Her thoughts turned at lightning speed, and her divine sense moved, activating all the talisman formations she set up along the way. It was fine if someone from the palace accidentally stepped into her talisman formations. With the current strength of her divine sense, she had no problems controlling talisman formations from a distance of 500 kilometers without harming any innocent people. As for the person who rashly barged into her talisman formations and took the fake out by activating the divine weapon, Arbor curled her lips coldly. You can only blame yourself for not taking the path to heaven and barging into hell when there was no door to hell. Arbor followed the traces left behind by the tracking talisman several hundred meters forward and discovered the fake Madame Nei Wei's wide-eyed body under a green plant. At first glance, everyone was shocked by the fake Madame Nei Wei's death. Her eyes were wide open and empty, as if she had seen something, and her mouth also gaped. She wanted to cry out as if she was caught off guard, but she still couldn't make a sound at the last moment of her life. Her death was incomparably miserable. Arbor only swept her a glance before turning her face away in disgust. Now, this fake Madame Nei Wei had revealed her true appearance. Her round and plump middle-aged woman's face didn't resemble her mother Madame Nei Wei in the slightest. This directional transformational medicinal liquid was truly extremely annoying. She had to speed up and develop a medicine that was faster than forcing people to take the antidote orally. It would be best if it was something like a medicinal powder. She could make people reveal their true appearance with a casual sprinkle. This way, it would be more convenient and more effective. When she thought of this, the little stoic's tightly pursed lips couldn't help but droop slightly, revealing a solemn and serious expression. How did this fake die? A female official beside the Empress quickly walked forward and was about to squat in front of the corpse to take a look. He only heard the little stoic shout, "Don't move." The female official's hand, which was about to flip the corpse, froze in midair. The little stoic rushed forward and directly poured half a bottle of corpse-dissolving water on the fake Madame Nei Wei's body, dissolving the corpse in a matter of minutes without even blinking. The onlookers stole a glance at her and felt a chill in their hearts. The young crown prince consort was truly ruthless. The White Empress purposely said to everyone, "This corpse must have been poisoned by someone. If Autumn Leaf had touched it just now, she definitely wouldn't have gotten any benefits." Everyone came to a sudden realization and stole another glance at the little crown princess. The latter was expressionless, but his gaze was fixed on the corpse that had turned into water. After the corpse was dissolved, she stepped forward again and took out a bottle. She then sprinkled something in a radius of several feet to purify the poison that had seeped into the soil. It had to be known that if the Empress didn't give her an explanation, the little crown princess wouldn't bother to explain even half a sentence in 10,000 years. So what if she dissolved it? In any case, in other people's eyes, she was an especially cruel person. When had she ever cared about other people's opinions? Chapter 5077. Although the female official Autumn Leaf was startled, she quickly reacted and hurriedly bowed to Arbor, thanking her gratefully. Many thanks to the Crown Princess for the reminder. If the Crown Princess hadn't spoken so quickly just now, she didn't know what would have happened to her. Seeing how the Crown Princess handled the corpse so cautiously, it could be seen that the poison on the corpse wasn't something simple. The detestable murderer killed this woman and left her in the chrysanthemum garden. Before leaving, he even set a trap for everyone and left behind a trace of the poison. It was truly extremely sinister. Arbor nodded slightly, but didn't say anything. She was the only one who knew that the poison on the corpse was contagious. If anyone touched a bit of it on their hands, the poison would quickly spread and spread. If anyone came into contact with it, they would also quickly be infected with this poison. If she didn't clean it up, once this poison spread in the palace, the consequences would be unthinkable. That person can't have escaped too far. The 20 or so talisman arrays she had set up were twisted and turned like a maze. They could be combined together to work at the same time, but they could also be used separately to block and kill. Only she knew best how to use them. Even if that person had a divine weapon as a guide, he probably wouldn't be able to escape her maze of multiple talisman arrays. Arbor turned to Mo Yin and said, "You and Mother, stay here. I'll go with you." Prince Mo immediately interrupted Arbor and hurriedly stood next to his wife. What a joke! How could he be at ease letting his wife run after such a dangerous person alone? Absolutely not. He had to follow. Me. I'll go too. How could she not watch when there was a show? Bai Wuxia also hurriedly reached out to sign up. Seeing this, the old nanny following the Empress couldn't help but twitch her mouth. She hurriedly raised her hand to support the Empress's raised hand and coughed lightly. Your Highness, can we not get so excited just because there's a show? Mother, aren't you going to the East Gate to check on the Grand Concubine's condition? The little crown princess asked in confusion. Consort Dowager, reminded by Arbor, Queen Bai seemed to have just remembered the old princess. She hurriedly waved her hand and said, No, your father should have sent someone over. Father? The Empress nodded repeatedly and said with a smile, Aya, do you think your father is completely defenseless? In fact, as early as a few days ago, your father had already sensed that the capital was not peaceful. Over the past few days, he has already sent people to strengthen the security. The secret guards have already investigated the other party's identity. Your father is biding his time, waiting for the other party to make the first move and expose themselves. Queen Bai looked like she was enjoying the show. Just now, I heard that the concubine dowager was in danger at the East Gate. Only then did I know why these two fakes enter the palace. They must be here to create chaos and provide cover for others. Bai Wuxia snorted and said, She really has a good plan. Unfortunately, she is unlucky to have met her daughter-in-law as soon as she entered the palace. Not only did she meet the real person, but she was also killed by the real person with one hand. Of course, her fate was extremely bad. The Empress talked to herself for a while and suddenly glanced at her son and daughter-in-law. She saw that the young couple was looking at her with the same expression. She couldn't help but feel happy when she saw this. She smiled and asked, Do you admire your father and mother? Chapter 5078. Prince Mo sighed ruefully in his heart. As expected, this biological father of his was truly much more reliable than the old great king of the Mo kingdom, His Highness the Crown Prince, who had been cleaning up after his adoptive father's messes for more than a decade, suddenly felt a bit idle. His biological father was truly capable, and he didn't need to worry too much about court affairs now. He also handled crisis situations quite well. Arbor couldn't help but sigh ruefully in his heart. He raised a small hand and patted Prince Mo's lapel. Pretty good. It was pretty good. Prince Mo thought that he finally didn't have to rush about and toil so hard in the future. He was also a child who could rely on his father on the other side. Empress Bai held her daughter-in-law's hand and nagged. Little glutinous dumpling's father has been so busy these past 2 days that I haven't seen him at all. I wanted to reprimand him, but now it looks like he didn't work for nothing. Glutinous dumpling's wife. Let's go take a look at the person who fell into your talisman matrix first. Then, let's go to the East Gate to see your father. When your father was young, he was extraordinarily valiant and could fend off 100 enemies alone. He was definitely an expert in battle. But he's not too bad now. Empress Bai glanced at her son with a grin. Son, you can't be thinking that your father and mother are still in the dark about the situation in the city, right? Your father and mother aren't old yet. At the very least, we can still support you juniors for 30 to 50 years. It's absolutely not a problem. Mo Yin couldn't help but laugh. She tugged her mother's hand and pretended to be obedient. Mother, how can 30 to 50 years be enough? At least several hundred years. You must support your son and daughter-in-law. The little stoic very much agreed with these words and nodded empathetically. Support. If father caused trouble for Jojo's lotus, then beat father. If the officials caused trouble for Jojo, then beat those old officials who didn't know what was good for them. When Her Majesty the Empress saw her stoic-faced daughter-in-law's expression, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. The old nanny, serving beside her, couldn't help but twitch the corners of her eyes. She coughed lightly and reminded, "Your Highness, it's already been a quarter of an hour. You three women are chattering endlessly here. Do you still want to do something serious?" The White Queen patted her thigh and quickly said, Yes, let's go and take a look. We still have to hurry to the East Gate to watch the show." The old nanny couldn't help but be speechless. She didn't even have the strength to ridicule Her Imperial Highness. Her temperament had remained the same for decades. Even after sleeping for so many years, she still hadn't changed at all. He would go wherever there was a commotion. The group of people followed Arbor out of the chrysanthemum garden and walked along the palace walls for about half an hour. Only then did they stop in a courtyard next to a painted corridor. It's such a remote place. White Queen looked around curiously. "Jojo, are you sure it's here?" Arbor nodded and waved her small hand at everyone. Then, she strode forward into that painted corridor. The group of people followed the little crown princess over. Sure enough, they didn't walk far before they saw a bearded, gray-haired elderly man with a drooping face. He was fiddling with a lamp in his hand. Arbor's small face was taut as she expressionlessly said, "No need to try. Do you think you can get out of the talisman matrix that I set up? You will definitely trigger the other talisman matrices if you walk out of the first double confinement matrix." Talisman matrices within talisman matrices, one set after another. Just 20 or so sets of talisman matrices that didn't overlap would exhaust people to death inside. Chapter 5079. No matter how powerful a godly artifact was, it couldn't withstand this kind of consumption. Sooner or later, it would run out of uses. Grand State Preceptor Larry was facing such an awkward situation. The guiding light had run out of uses, but he was still spinning around in an unknown rune array. Even if he used his godly power to bombard the surroundings, the godly power he used up would only merge into the endless void. It was like punching into a pile of cotton. He couldn't hit anything substantial at all. This Grand State Preceptor turned around and stared at Arbor with a malicious gaze. This gaze angered His Highness the Crown Prince, who was beside Sir Jojo. "You don't want her trick anymore." The Crown Prince sneered. His right hand, which was next to his robe, suddenly moved. A dark purple stream of light was already wrapped around his hand. Xiao Mu hastily tugged at his hand, making him withdraw the purple flames. "You're that Grand State Preceptor, Lila," Arbor said with a cold expression. "I didn't expect you to enter the Imperial Palace alone. Lila, I don't know if I should praise you for your courage or say that you're stupid. Do you think you're very secretive?" "Stupid." Emolien was speechless. His wife had called this Grand Preceptor's name wrong twice in a row. He was too embarrassed to open his mouth and remind his wife that she called his name wrong. Moreover, he kept saying that the other party was stupid. Anyone who heard this would fly into a rage. Prince Emo sneaked a glance at Grand State Preceptor Larry's face. As expected, his face was as black as charcoal. "Stupid girl, how dare you?" Grand State Preceptor Larry roared. His entire body was so tense that he could shoot out in an instant. Like an arrow on a bow, he could charge toward Arbor at any time. "Husband!" Sir Jojo raised a pair of big black eyes and stared at him defensively. Her instinctive reaction was to summon her husband. Emolien's mouth twitched as he facepalmed. Before his brain could make a judgment, his body had already flashed very honestly, and he flew over by himself. He landed in front of State Preceptor Larry with a whoosh like a bolt of black fire, as fast as lightning. The Grand State Preceptor probably didn't expect that the other party would be so immoral as to attack. Immediately, this guy didn't have time to defend himself, and a cluster of black flames almost burned the tip of his nose. He was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat, and his body stiffly fell backward. He fell quickly and fiercely. As a result, He landed solidly on the ground with a bang. The two blue and white tiles on the ground cracked. Everyone couldn't help but stare at the sky speechlessly. This Grand State Preceptor was too unlucky to have met such a fiendish couple. Today, he would definitely not be able to get over it. Grand State Preceptor Larry rolled on the ground and was about to stand up. Crown Prince M.O. expressionlessly flung out a dozen talismans at him. However, with a burst of bone-cracking sounds, this unlucky State Preceptor was unable to straighten his body like a carp, doing a somersault instead. It was as if all the bones in his body had been crushed. Every part of his body was in excruciating pain. Arbor's eyes lit up. The speed at which her husband threw the gravity talisman was too fast, and his gesture was too cool. Just as this Lila was about to stand up, he was smashed by the gravity talisman. The force of the impact collided with the force of the gravity talisman. The timing was just right. This unlucky State Preceptor's body should have been crushed by the force of the collision. "Idiot!" Arbor scolded crisply. She walked over to Emolian's side and said, "Search." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.